The blizzard hit like a living thing, vicious, hungry, determined to swallow her whole. Randy Sawyer stumbled through snow that rose past her knees, each step a battle against wind that shrieked through the trees like tortured spirits. Her lungs burned. Ice crystals clung to her eyelashes, blurring the world into nothing but white chaos and the dark silhouettes of pines bending under the storm's rage. She couldn't feel her fingers anymore. That terrified her more than the cold itself, more than the darkness pressing in from all sides, more than the knowledge that she was utterly, completely alone. An Omega without a pack was vulnerable. An Omega cast out in winter was as good as dead. Good riddance, the Alpha's voice echoed in her memory, cold as the wind tearing at her threadbare coat. You're weak, defective. We don't carry dead weight. Her foot caught on something buried beneath the snow, a root, a rock. It didn't matter, and she went down hard. The impact punched the air from her lungs. For a moment she just lay there, face pressed against the frozen ground, tasting copper and defeat. Get up. The voice in her head wasn't her wolf. Her wolf had gone silent 3 days ago, retreating so deep inside that Randy wondered if she'd ever hear her again. This voice was something else. Something older. Something that whispered of warmth and safety, and a place where the storm couldn't reach. Impossible. There was nothing out here but wilderness and death. But she pushed herself up anyway, because lying down meant giving up, and she'd be damned if she'd give those bastards the satisfaction of being right about her. The forest opened up ahead. She could sense it more than see it through the whiteout. Her Omega instincts, the ones her old pack called useless, tingled at the base of her spine. Shelter. Close. She lurched forward, dragging one foot after the other, her body moving on pure survival instinct, and then she saw it. At first, she thought the storm had driven her mad. Hypothermia did that, didn't it? Made you see things that weren't there. Warm, impossible things in the middle of frozen hell. But the cabin didn't disappear when she blinked. It sat in a small clearing, half buried in snow, its log walls dark with age and weather. The windows were dark. No smoke rose from the stone chimney. It looked abandoned. Had probably been abandoned for years, but it was shelter, and right now, shelter meant life. Randy didn't remember crossing the clearing. One moment she was at the tree line, the next she was stumbling up onto a small covered porch, her numb hands fumbling at the door. Locked. A sob tore from her throat, raw, desperate, the sound of hope dying. But then her shoulder hit the door, and the old wood gave way with a groan that sounded almost welcoming. She fell into darkness, and the blessed, beautiful absence of wind. The cabin smelled of dust and old wood and something else, something that made her Omega instincts hum with recognition. Wolves had been here once. Long ago. But the scent lingered like a ghost. Randy kicked the door shut behind her, and the silence that followed was so profound it hurt. She couldn't see anything, didn't care. She crawled forward on hands and knees until she hit a wall, then collapsed against it, shaking so violently her teeth chattered. I made it, she thought. I'm alive. For now. The cold she'd been running from followed her inside, seeping through the walls, rising from the floorboards. Without heat, without supplies, this cabin was just a prettier coffin than the forest outside. But it was something, a chance. And Randy had learned long ago that you don't waste chances. When she could move again, when the violent shaking subsided to mere trembling, she forced herself to explore. Her hands found a table, chairs, a cold iron stove in what must be the main room. Shelves lined one wall, mostly empty, but her searching fingers found a box of matches that rattled with promise. Her hands shook so badly it took 6 tries to strike one. The tiny flame flared to life, and for the first time in 3 days, Randy could see. The cabin was small, one main room with a sleeping loft accessible by a ladder, a tiny kitchen area, and a door that probably led to a back room or storage. But it was solid. Well built, the kind of place someone had made with care, meant to last. Someone who wasn't here anymore. Randy lit a stub of candle she found on the table, and surveyed her salvation. Firewood blessed. Beautiful firewood was stacked beside the stove. Old, dried out, perfect for burning. Her hands moved on autopilot, her Omega instincts taking over as she built a fire with the desperate efficiency of someone who'd been cold too long. The kindling caught. Flames licked at the larger logs. Actual, real heat began to radiate into the frozen space. Randy sank down in front of the stove and let herself cry. Not pretty tears. Not quiet ones. The kind of crying that came from your bones, from every hurt you'd ever swallowed, every rejection you'd ever endured. She cried for the pack that abandoned her, for the alpha who'd looked at her like she was garbage, for her parents who'd died when she was 12, leaving her alone in a world that had no use for weak omegas. She cried until she had nothing left, until the warmth from the fire had seeped into her frozen limbs and exhaustion pulled at her with irresistible weight. I'll figure out the rest tomorrow, she thought, curling up on the floor in front of the stove. Tomorrow I'll think about food and supplies and how to survive. Tonight I just need to not die. Sleep took her fast and deep, pulling her under like dark water. She didn't dream. Or if she did, she didn't remember. What she did remember, when she woke to weak sunlight filtering through grimy windows, was the feeling that had settled over her sometime in the night. Not quite peace, not quite hope, but something close to both. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she needed to be. The storm had passed. Through the window, the world gleamed white and pristine under a pale blue sky. Beautiful, deadly, and utterly indifferent to whether she lived or died out here. Randy stood on shaky legs and assessed her situation with the practical ruthlessness she'd learned from years of being unwanted. Food, none. Water, snow, which she could melt. Firewood, enough for maybe 3 days if she was careful. Supplies, essentially nothing. Chances of survival, not good, but not zero, either. She spent the morning exploring properly. The back room turned out to be a small storage area with shelves that held a few rusted tools, some old rope, and miracle of miracles, a hunting knife in a leather sheath. Not much, but more than she'd had yesterday. The loft held a bed frame with an ancient, mouse-chewed mattress and a trunk that, when opened, revealed wool blankets that smelled of cedar and thyme. Randy nearly cried again at the sight of them. Someone lived here, she thought, running her hands over the rough wool. Someone made a life in this place. Could she? The question was insane. She was one omega alone in the wilderness, with no pack, no supplies, and winter closing its jaws around this part of the world for months to come. But that voice, that strange, old voice that had urged her forward through the storm, whispered again. You're not meant to just survive, little omega. You're meant to build. Randy didn't know what that meant, didn't care to analyze it. She had more immediate problems, like the fact that she was starving. The forest beyond the cabin clearing would have game rabbits, maybe even deer if she was lucky. But hunting required skill she didn't have, and strength she'd lost 3 days ago when her pack stopped feeding her, deeming her unworthy of their resources. Still, she had to try. She wrapped herself in one of the wool blankets, took the hunting knife, and stepped out into the snow. The cold hit her like a slap, but it wasn't the vicious, killing cold of the blizzard. This was clean, sharp, the kind of cold that demanded respect but didn't actively try to murder you. Randy found tracks almost immediately, rabbit, from the looks of it, fresh from this morning. She followed them with the patience her omega nature gave her, moving quietly through the snow, barely breathing. She didn't catch the rabbit. What she found instead, when she crested a small rise, made her heart stop. 7 wolves. Not shifters in wolf form, actual wolves, massive and magnificent, their fur thick against the cold. They moved through the trees below her in a tight pack, and even from this distance, she could see something was wrong. They were limping, injured. The largest one, a gray male with silver markings, had a wound on its flank that stained the snow red wherever he stepped. Another, smaller and darker, favored its front left leg. Randy should have run, should have hidden, gotten back to the cabin, barred the door against predators that could tear her apart without breaking a sweat. But that old voice whispered again, and her omega instincts surged so strongly she gasped. They need help. No, she whispered to herself. No, that's insane. They're wolves, wild animals. They'll kill me. But she didn't move. Couldn't move. Just watched as the pack slowly made their way through the snow, clearly searching for something. The gray male's head suddenly lifted. His nose worked the air, and then he looked directly at her. Their eyes met across the distance, gold meeting brown, and Randy felt something slam into her chest with the force of recognition. These weren't just wolves. Before she could process that thought, before she could react at all, the gray male let out a low, keening sound that was part howl, part plea. Then he collapsed in the snow. The other 6 wolves surrounded him immediately, their distress palpable even from here. One of them, a russet-colored female, looked up at Randy and did something no wild wolf should be able to do. She bowed her head, a gesture of submission, of asking, of begging, "Help us." Randy's hands clenched on the knife. Every logical bone in her body screamed at her to run. This was impossible, dangerous, utterly mad, but she'd been cast out for being weak, for being useless, for being an omega whose instincts were deemed wrong by alphas who'd forgotten what it meant to care for anyone but themselves. And right now, her instincts were singing with absolute certainty. These wolves needed her, and maybe, just maybe, she needed them too. Randy took a deep breath, tasted snow and pine, and the sharp clarity that came with making a choice you couldn't take back. Then she started down the hill toward 7 injured wolves who had no right to trust her but somehow did anyway. "All right," she whispered, more to herself than to them. "Let's see if I'm as crazy as they said I was." The russet wolf's tail wagged, once weak but unmistakable. "Thank you," the gesture said. Randy's omega heart, battered and bruised and supposedly broken, cracked open just a little bit wider, and the strangest rescue in the history of abandoned omegas began. Chapter 2: 7 Desperate Souls. Getting 7 injured wolves back to the cabin turned out to be the most terrifying, exhausting, and inexplicably right thing Randy had ever done. The gray male, the one who'd collapsed, was the biggest problem. He was massive, easily 200 pounds of muscle and fur, and when Randy reached him, she realized the wound on his flank was worse than she'd thought. Deep, ragged, like something had tried to tear him open. "Hey," she whispered, kneeling in the snow beside him. "Hey, I'm going to help you, okay? But you have to trust me." His golden eyes opened, focusing on her with an intelligence that made her breath catch. Not wild, not feral, aware. These weren't just wolves. She'd been right. They were shifters. The realization should have changed everything. Shifters were dangerous, territorial, and right now she was surrounded by 7 of them. But her omega instincts weren't screaming danger. They were screaming protect, help, heal. So she did. The gray male let her examine his wound without protest, though she felt him tense when her fingers probed the edges. "I know," she murmured. "I know it hurts. We need to get you somewhere warm. Can you stand?" He tried. Got his front legs under him before they buckled. Randy looked at the other 6 wolves, watching her with varying degrees of hope and wariness. "I have a cabin. Not far. There's fire, shelter, blankets. But I can't carry him alone." The russet female moved forward immediately, positioning herself on the gray male's other side. A smaller brown wolf, youngest of the group, Randy thought pressed against his hindquarters. Together, with Randy supporting as much of his weight as her omega strength allowed, they got him standing. The journey back to the cabin took forever. They moved in painful increments, stopping every few yards when the gray male's strength gave out. The other wolves circled them protectively, and Randy realized they were guarding her as much as their fallen packmate. "They know I'm helping," she thought. "They're protecting me because I'm protecting him." Something in her chest that had been cold and tight for months began to thaw. By the time they reached the cabin, Randy was shaking with exhaustion, and the gray male's blood had stained her borrowed blanket crimson. She shouldered the door open, thankfully she hadn't locked it, and the wolves flooded inside like they'd been waiting for permission. The fire had burned down to coals. Randy got it going again with the last of her energy, then turned to face 7 pairs of eyes watching her from various positions around the small space. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Ground rules. I'll help you. I'll feed you if I can figure out how. I'll keep you warm, but you don't eat me, and you don't destroy the only shelter I have. Deal?" The gray male, lying on his side near the stove, made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Almost," Randy pointed at him. You're the priority. The rest of you," she looked at the other 6. "You look like you could use food and rest, but you're not dying. He might be." She didn't have medical supplies. Didn't have antibiotics or bandages or any of the things a proper healer would need. But she had snow for cleaning, fire for heat, and omega instincts that told her exactly what to do. She worked through the afternoon as weak winter sunlight faded to gray dusk, cleaned the wound with melted snow, pressed strips torn from her own shirt against it until the bleeding stopped. The gray male never made a sound, but she felt his pain in the way his muscles tensed, in the slight whine that escaped when she had to dig deeper to make sure the wound was clean. "I'm sorry," she whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry. Almost done. You're doing so well." The other wolves watched in silence, judging her, maybe, or just waiting to see if their leader would survive. When she finally finished, when she'd done everything she could possibly do with nothing but determination and instinct, Randy sat back on her heels and looked at her handiwork. Not good, not professional, but better than leaving him to bleed out in the snow. "That's all I can do," she said quietly. "The rest is up to you." The gray male's eyes opened again. When had they closed? And he looked at her with such intensity that Randy felt pinned in place. Then he shifted. She should have been prepared for it, should have expected it. But watching a massive wolf transform into an equally massive man in the span of heartbeats stole the air from her lungs. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things were beautiful, all hard angles and lean muscle and a face that looked like it rarely smiled. Dark hair fell across his forehead, damp with sweat, and those eyes, still gold, still intense, held her captive as surely as chains. "You saved my life," he said. His voice was rough, probably from pain, but there was something underneath it that made Randy's omega nature sit up and take notice. Authority, power, alpha. "I helped," Randy corrected, her heart hammering. "You're not saved yet. That wound needs proper medical attention. No human doctors." The statement was flat, final. "I'm not suggesting human doctors. I'm suggesting shifter healers. Your pack must have." "No pack." The words fell like stones. "Not anymore." The other 6 wolves whined in unison, a sound of shared pain that made Randy's throat tight. "What happened?" she asked quietly. The man, the alpha, because he was absolutely an alpha, she could feel it now, closed his eyes briefly. "Coup. Betrayal. The usual story when power changes hands and not everyone agrees with the new direction. They tried to kill you. They succeeded in killing most of us." His hand moved to his wounded side, pressed there like he could hold himself together through will alone. 17 of us escaped. 10 died in the first week. These 6. He looked at the wolves scattered around the cabin, and Randy saw naked grief in his expression. "These 6 are all I have left." Randy's hands clenched in her lap. She knew betrayal, knew what it felt like to be cast out, deemed worthless, left to die. But she'd been alone. This man had watched his people die one by one. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Randy felt exposed under that gaze, like he could see every secret, every wound, every carefully buried hurt. "You're an omega," he said, not a question. "Yes. Alone." "Yes. By choice?" Randy's laugh was bitter. "No one chooses to be abandoned." Something shifted in his expression, recognition, maybe, or understanding. "What's your name?" "Randy. Randy Sawyer." She hesitated. "What's yours?" "Russ." He winced as he tried to sit up, failed. "Russ Mercer. And these," he gestured to the 6 wolves, "are what's left of the Mercer pack." As if his words were permission, the other 6 began to shift. Randy had never seen multiple shifts at once. It was mesmerizing and slightly terrifying, bones rearranging, fur receding, human forms emerging from animal ones like butterflies from cocoons. When it was done, 6 naked strangers stood in her tiny cabin, all looking at her with expressions ranging from grateful to wary to exhausted. "We need clothes," the russet-colored wolf, now a woman with copper hair and sharp green eyes, said flatly. "And food, and medical supplies, and about 1,000 other things we don't have." "Denise," Russ said quietly, a warning in his tone. The woman Denise sighed. "I'm not being ungrateful. I'm being realistic. We're in the middle of nowhere. Winter's barely started, and we have exactly 0 resources. Even with this cabin," she looked around, "which is more than we had yesterday, we're not exactly in great shape." She wasn't wrong. Randy looked at the 7 shifters, all injured to varying degrees, all clearly underfed and exhausted, and felt the weight of impossible responsibility settle on her shoulders. "The blankets in the loft," she said. "They're old, but they're wool. You can wrap up in those for now. As for food," she bit her lip, "I haven't eaten in 3 days. I was trying to hunt when I found you. So unless one of you knows how to catch game in the middle of winter, we're all going to be hungry." A younger man, the one who'd been the small brown wolf, raised his hand tentatively. "I can hunt. I'm not good at much else, but I can hunt. That's something, Drew," another man said. He was older, with gray at his temples, and a wound on his shoulder that looked infected. "We'll figure the rest out, will we?" Denise's voice was sharp. "Wallace, we barely made it here." "Russ is," she looked at him, and Randy saw real fear in her eyes. "He's not healing like he should. None of us are. We lost our pack bonds when they exiled us. Without that connection, without the collective strength, we're weaker." Russ finished quietly. "I know." Silence fell, heavy and cold as the snow outside. Randy looked at these 7 strangers who'd stumbled into her life like fate's idea of a joke. They were broken. She was broken. Together they had barely enough resources to survive a week, let alone a winter. It was impossible. Utterly, completely insane. But that voice, that old, deep voice that had guided her through the storm, whispered again, "This is why you're here. This is what you were meant to build." "I have a proposal," Randy heard herself say. 7 pairs of eyes focused on her. "You need shelter and healing. I need not to die alone in the woods." She took a breath. "This cabin is mine by right of finding it. But I'm willing to share it on one condition." "Name it," Russ said immediately. "We work together. You hunt, I'll cook, and tend wounds. We gather firewood together, ration supplies together, make decisions together. No one's in charge." She looked directly at Russ. "Because being in charge is what got you exiled and me abandoned. We're equals here. Or we're nothing." Denise laughed, a short, sharp sound. "An Omega demanding equality with an Alpha. That's reasonable," Russ interrupted. His golden eyes never left Randy's face. "More than reasonable. It's fair. Russ, she saved my life, Denise. And she's right. The old ways got us here injured, exiled, nearly dead. Maybe it's time to try something new." He extended his hand toward Randy, the gesture formal despite his nakedness, despite the blood seeping through the makeshift bandage on his side. "Partners?" he asked. Randy looked at that hand, scarred, strong, trembling slightly with pain or exhaustion or both. She thought about her old pack. About the Alpha, who'd thrown her out without a second thought. About all the time she'd been told an Omega's opinion didn't matter. This was different. This was a choice. She took his hand. His palm was warm against hers, calloused, solid, real. "Partners," she agreed. Something sparked between them at the contact, a jolt of recognition that made them both freeze. Randy felt it race up her arm and straight to her chest, where it settled like an ember waiting to ignite. "Mate bond," her Omega whispered, finally surfacing after days of silence. "Possible mate bond." "No. That was impossible. You didn't find your mate in the middle of a frozen wilderness surrounded by 6 other half-dead shifters. That wasn't how the universe worked." But Russ's eyes had widened, and she knew he'd felt it too. Neither of them mentioned it. "All right then," Wallace said, breaking the tension. "Partners it is. Now can we please figure out the whole not starving to death situation? Because I'd really like to not die after surviving this long." Drew was already heading for the door, apparently ready to hunt despite the gathering darkness. The other 3 men and Denise were investigating the cabin's resources with the efficient ruthlessness of people who'd learned to make do with nothing. And Russ was still holding Randy's hand, still looking at her like she was a puzzle he desperately needed to solve. "Why?" he asked quietly, too low for the others to hear. "Why help us? You don't know us. Don't owe us anything." Randy thought about that voice, about instinct, about the strange certainty that had pulled her through the storm to this exact place at this exact time. "Because someone needed to," she said simply. "And I was here. It wasn't the whole truth." Wasn't even close, but it was all she could give him right now. With her omega instincts screaming mate and her logical brain screaming danger and her heart, her battered, broken heart whispering maybe, maybe, maybe. Russ nodded slowly, like her answer made sense when it absolutely didn't. Then he released her hand and fell back onto the floor, unconscious. The cabin erupted into controlled chaos. Denise and Wallace rushing over. Someone checking his pulse. Another layering blankets over him. Randy moved on autopilot, checking his wound, relieved to find no fresh bleeding. "He'll be okay," she said, surprised by the certainty in her voice. "He just needs rest. His body's trying to heal." "Without a pack bond, healing takes longer," Denise said. She looked at Randy with something like respect in her green eyes. "But you seem to know that already." "I know a lot about being without a pack," Randy replied quietly. Understanding passed between them, two women who'd learned the hard way that survival sometimes meant standing alone. "Well," Denise said, surveying the cabin full of unconscious alpha and exhausted packmates, "I guess we're doing this, then. Building something from nothing in the middle of frozen hell with an omega we just met." "When you say it like that, it sounds insane," one of the other men muttered. "It is insane," Denise agreed. "But I'm too tired to care anymore." She looked at Randy, and something like a smile, small, fragile, real, crossed her face. "Welcome to the pack, Omega. Or whatever we're calling this disaster." Randy smiled back. And for the first time in months, it didn't feel forced. "I think disaster covers it pretty well." Outside, the wind picked up, howling around the cabin like a warning or a promise. Inside, 7 shifters and 1 omega settled in for their first night together. Cold, hungry, injured, and absolutely not equipped for any of this. But they were alive. And somehow, impossibly, that felt like enough. For now. Chapter 3. Echoes of Rejection. Randy didn't sleep that first night. She sat by the fire, feeding it log after careful log, watching 7 strangers breathe in the flickering darkness. Russ lay closest to the stove, his chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of deep unconsciousness. The others had arranged themselves around the small space like planets orbiting a sun, close enough for warmth, far enough for dignity. Drew had returned near midnight with 2 rabbits, skinned and cleaned. They'd cooked them over the fire and divided the meat into 7 careful portions. Randy had refused hers until Denise literally put it in her hand and said, "Eat, or you'll be useless tomorrow." So she'd eaten. The first real food in days, and it had tasted like salvation. Now, in the quiet hours before dawn, Randy let herself think about the things she'd been running from. 3 months ago. The memory came whether she wanted it or not. She'd been part of the Clearwater Pack, a mid-sized group that controlled territory in the northern mountains. Not the biggest pack, not the strongest, but stable, safe. Or so she'd thought. Her parents had died when she was 12, a hunting accident that the pack whispered wasn't an accident at all. But Randy had been young, and orphaned omegas didn't ask questions if they wanted to survive. So she'd kept her head down, made herself useful, and tried not to be a burden. She'd almost succeeded. The problem started when she turned 21. That's when the heats should have begun, the biological imperative that made omegas valuable to packs, that ensured bonding and children and the continuation of pack lines. Randy's heat never came. Month after month, nothing. The pack healer examined her, ran tests, consulted with healers from neighboring territories. The verdict came back uniform. Physically, Randy was fine, healthy, normal. She just wasn't going into heat. Defective, Alpha Gerald had said, the word clinical and cutting. An omega who can't bond, can't breed, can't fulfill the basic functions of her designation. "But I can still help the pack," Randy had argued, desperate. "I can cook, clean, tend children, organize supplies. We have enough domestic help." Gerald's eyes had been cold. "What we need are omegas who can strengthen pack bonds, who can give us children, who can actually contribute to our future. I'm contributing. I work harder than half the betas. And you eat our food, use our resources, take up space that could go to someone useful." The words had hit like physical blows. "You're casting me out." Not a question. She'd known the moment she'd been summoned to his office. Known by the way the other pack members had stopped meeting her eyes. "We're releasing you," Gerald corrected, as if there was a difference. You're free to find another pack, another place. Somewhere your limitations won't be such a burden. What he'd really meant. You're free to die alone. No pack would take a defective Omega. They all had their own mouths to feed, their own problems to solve. Taking in a wolf who couldn't fulfill the most basic Omega functions, that was charity no one could afford. Randy had packed her few belongings, taken the supplies they'd grudgingly given her enough for maybe 3 days, and walked out of the only home she'd ever known. She'd lasted 2 weeks on her own before the first winter storm hit. And then she'd found the cabin. Or the cabin found you. That old voice whispered now, in the pre-dawn stillness. Randy looked at Russ, at the way the firelight painted shadows across his face. An alpha without a pack. An Omega without a heat. Both of them cast out. Deemed defective. Left to die. Except they hadn't died. They'd found each other instead. Can't sleep? The voice was quiet, careful not to wake the others. Randy turned to find Denise sitting up, her copper hair a wild halo around her face. Someone needs to keep the fire going, Randy said. That someone doesn't have to be you. Denise moved closer, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. You've been up for how long? 30 hours? More? I've slept rough before. I can handle it. I'm sure you can. Question is, should you have to? Randy didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 women watching firelight dance across log walls and sleeping bodies. Why did your pack cast you out? Denise asked finally. Randy could have deflected. Could have said it was none of her business. But there was something about the darkness, about exhaustion, about the strange intimacy of keeping watch together that made honesty easier than lies. I'm broken, she said simply. Defective. An Omega who can't fulfill Omega functions. Denise was quiet for a long moment. Then, the heat thing? Randy's head snapped around. How did you? I'm a pack beta. Was a pack beta. Denise's smile was sad. Part of my job was tracking Omega cycles, making sure everyone was healthy and cared for during vulnerable times. You have the scent of an Omega who's never cycled. It's subtle, but it's there. Shame burned hot in Randy's chest. So you know. I'm useless. No. The word was sharp. You're different. There's a distinction. My old pack didn't think so. Your old pack was run by idiots. Denise poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. You want to know what I think? I think treating people like livestock valuable only for breeding and bonding is exactly the kind of thinking that destroys packs from the inside. Randy blinked. That's not a very beta thing to say. Yeah, well, that's part of why I'm here instead of there. Denise's jaw tightened. Russ's brother, the one who staged the coup, he had very specific ideas about how the pack should be run. Traditional ideas. Omegas for breeding, betas for working, alphas for leading. Anyone who didn't fit the mold was considered a problem. And you didn't fit? I questioned too much. Argued too much. Suggested maybe we should value people for what they could do rather than what they were born as. Denise laughed bitterly. Turns out that's revolutionary thinking in some circles. His brother, Randy said carefully. Russ's brother did this to him? Julian. Denise's voice went flat. Younger by 3 years, ambitious by nature, and absolutely convinced that Russ was leading the pack to ruin by being too soft, too progressive, too willing to bend traditional rules. What kind of rules? Denise looked at her meaningfully. The kind that said Omegas who don't cycle should be exiled. The kind that said anyone who questioned alpha authority should be punished. The kind that valued power over compassion. Understanding crashed over Randy like cold water. Russ wouldn't enforce those rules. No, he wouldn't. He kept arguing for a different way for valuing pack members as individuals, for caring about quality of life over quantity of soldiers. Denise's eyes were distant, seeing things Randy couldn't. Julian gathered supporters, people who thought the old ways were better. And when he had enough backing, she didn't need to finish. Randy could imagine the rest. The challenge, the fight, the bloodshed. How many? Randy asked quietly. How many what? How many died because Russ tried to do things differently? 43. Denise's voice cracked. 43 people who stood with him, who believed in his vision of what a pack could be. Julian's people killed them. Systematically. Efficiently. And Russ. She looked at him, still unconscious by the fire. Russ blames himself for every single one. Randy's chest ached. She thought about her own exile, her own rejection, and realized how small her pain was compared to this. She'd lost a pack that never truly valued her. Russ had lost people he'd loved, people who'd died believing in his leadership. He shouldn't blame himself, Randy said. Try telling him that. Denise wiped at her eyes roughly. He's an alpha. Taking responsibility for his pack is coded into his DNA. Doesn't matter that Julian's the one who spilled the blood. Russ was the leader. They died under his protection. In his mind, that makes their deaths his fault. That's not fair. No. But it's how alphas think. Denise looked at Randy, and there was something knowing in her gaze. You felt it, didn't you? When you shook hands. Randy's heart stuttered. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. The connection, the recognition. Denise's voice was gentle but firm. He's your mate, Randy. Or could be. If you both let it happen. That's impossible. Mates are rare. And I'm defective, broken. Denise raised an eyebrow. Or maybe you're exactly what he needs. An Omega who doesn't trigger every protective instinct he's been beating himself up for failing at. Someone who's as much an outsider as he is now. Someone who understands what it's like to be cast out for not fitting the mold. Randy shook her head, even as something in her chest warmed at the words. It doesn't matter. Even if the bond is there, I can't complete it. Without heats. Without the ability to actually bond. Who says? Denise challenged. Who made the rules about how bonding has to work? The same people who cast you out? The same traditional thinkers who value biology over choice? It's not about rules, it's about reality. Bonding requires. It requires two people who choose each other. Everything else is just details. Denise stood, stretching. My shift to keep watch. You need to sleep. I'm fine. Randy. Denise's voice was kind but immovable. You saved our alpha's life yesterday. You gave us shelter when you had every reason to turn us away. You're part of this now, whatever this is. Which means we take care of you too. So sleep. That's an order from your new pack beta. I thought we weren't doing pack hierarchy, Randy said, but she was smiling despite herself. We're not, but someone needs to tell you when you're being stubborn, and I'm volunteering for the job. Randy wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her with irresistible weight, and the blankets piled near the fire looked impossibly inviting. She curled up close to Russ, close enough to monitor his breathing, she told herself. Nothing more, and let her eyes drift shut. The last thing she heard before sleep took her was Denise's voice, soft as a prayer. Thank you for not leaving us to die. Thank you for not being what I was afraid you'd be, Randy whispered back. And then there was only warmth and darkness, and the feeling of being, for the first time in months, not completely alone. In her dreams, Randy walked through snow that didn't touch her. The forest around her was silver bright, illuminated by moonlight that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. She wasn't cold, wasn't afraid, wasn't anything but curious as she followed a path that appeared beneath her feet, winding deeper into the trees. Ahead, in a clearing she'd never seen before, stood a woman. No, not a woman, something more, something old. Her form shifted like smoke, one moment young and beautiful, the next ancient and weathered. When she spoke, her voice was the one that had guided Randy through the storm. You're wondering why you're here. I'm dreaming, Randy said. You're listening. Finally. The woman smiled, and it was sad and knowing. I've been calling you for years, little Omega. Since you were 12 years old and your parents left you with a gift you didn't understand. My parents died in an accident. Your parents died protecting a secret. Your secret. The woman moved closer, and Randy saw her eyes were silver, the same silver as the moon, as the snow, as the light that seemed to emanate from everywhere. You are not defective, Randy Sawyer. You are dormant. I don't understand. You will. When the time comes, when you're ready, you'll understand what you truly are, what your bloodline carries, why the heats never came, because you were never meant to bond the way other Omegas bond. The woman reached out and touched Randy's chest, right over her heart. Warmth bloomed there, spreading through her like sunlight through ice. You are a haven keeper, the first in 3 generations. And those 7 wolves who found you? They didn't find you by accident. They were drawn here by the same magic that drew you, by the same ancient call. I don't have magic. I'm just an Omega who survived alone in a winter that should have killed her. Who found shelter that's been empty for decades. Who can calm injured alphas with a touch and make traumatized shifters trust with a word. The woman laughed softly. Your magic is subtle, child, but it's there, and it's waking up. What does it want from me? What it's always wanted. For you to build what was lost. To create sanctuary where there was none. To prove that broken things can heal, if they're given the right place to do it. The dream was fading, the silver light dimming. Randy tried to hold on to it, to ask more questions, but the woman was already disappearing into mist and moonlight. Wait, what am I supposed to? Trust your instincts, Haven Keeper. They've never led you wrong. And then there was only darkness, and the sound of breathing, and the warmth of bodies huddled together against the cold. Randy woke to the smell of cooking meat and weak morning sunlight. She sat up slowly, disoriented. The fire was blazing, someone had built it up while she slept. Drew was at the stove, doing something with the remaining rabbit. The others were stirring, stretching, moving with the careful stiffness of people whose bodies hurt. And Russ was awake. He sat with his back against the wall, watching her with those unsettling gold eyes. You talk in your sleep, he said quietly. Randy's heart jumped. What did I say? Something about Haven Keepers and magic and broken things healing. He tilted his head. Want to tell me what that means? Randy opened her mouth. Closed it. She didn't know what it meant. Didn't understand half of what the dream woman had said. But looking at Russ, at the hope barely visible beneath his exhaustion, at the way he was trying so hard to hold himself together for the 6 people depending on him, she thought maybe she was starting to. I think, she said slowly, I think I'm supposed to help you build something here. Something different from what you lost. Something better. With 7 broken wolves and 0 resources? With 7 survivors and 1 impossible Omega, she corrected. And maybe that's enough. Russ stared at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled. It was small. Fragile. But real. Maybe, he said. It is. And in that moment, in the weak morning light filtering through grimy windows, surrounded by strangers who were becoming something more, Randy felt the magic the dream woman had spoken of stir in her chest. Quiet, subtle, certain. This is why you're here, it whispered. This is what you were meant to build. And for the first time in her life, Randy didn't question it. She just believed. Chapter 4. Silver Flames Awaken. 3 days passed in a blur of survival routines. Drew and Wallace hunted in shifts, bringing back rabbits and, once, a small deer that they butchered with the efficiency of desperation. Denise organized their meager supplies with the precision of someone used to managing chaos. The others, Glenn, a quiet man with haunted eyes, Craig, who never stopped scanning for threats, and Wendell, the oldest of them at maybe 40, worked on reinforcing the cabin against the cold. And Randy cooked, tended wounds, and tried not to think about the dream. Except she couldn't stop thinking about it. Haven Keeper. The words echoed in her mind every time she moved through the cabin. Every time she touched one of them. And felt something ease in their tension. It was subtle, so subtle she might have imagined it, but it was there. When she checked Russ's wound each morning and evening, she swore it was healing faster than it should. When Craig woke screaming from nightmares, her presence by his side calmed him in minutes. When Wendell's fever spiked from his infected shoulder, her hands on his forehead seemed to cool the worst of the burning. You've got a gift, Wallace said on the 3rd evening, watching her change Wendell's bandage. I'm just doing what needs to be done. No, you're doing more than that. Wallace's eyes were shrewd. My mother was a healer. I know what medical care looks like. This is something else. Randy's hands stilled. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe you're not as defective as your old pack thought. Maybe you're just different. The word again. Different. Not broken, different. She wanted desperately to believe it. That night, while the others slept, Randy found herself drawn outside. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to turn the snow into a field of diamonds. Her breath fogged in the air. But the cold didn't bite like it had that first night. It felt expectant. Like the forest was waiting for something. She walked without thinking, her feet following a path she didn't consciously choose. Away from the cabin, through trees that stood like silent sentinels, toward something she couldn't name but absolutely needed to find. The forest opened up into a clearing she'd never seen before. In the center stood a circle of stones. They were old, ancient, half-buried in snow and moss, weathered by centuries of wind and rain. But they were arranged with purpose. Deliberate placement that spoke of ritual and intention. 7 stones in a perfect circle, each one taller than Randy, each carved with symbols that seemed to shift when she looked directly at them. "What is this place?" she whispered. The air shimmered. For a moment, just a heartbeat, Randy saw them. Shadows of wolves. Dozens of them, moving through the clearing like ghosts. And in the center, a woman with silver eyes and light radiating from her skin, raising her hands to the moon. Then the vision vanished, leaving only snow and stone and silence. But Randy knew. Deep in her bones, in that place where instinct lived, she knew. This was a sacred place, a place of power. And somehow, impossibly, it belonged to her. She moved forward slowly, reverently, until she stood in the center of the stone circle. The moment her foot crossed the boundary, energy rushed through her, not painful, but intense, like touching lightning and finding it warm instead of burning. The symbols on the stones began to glow, soft silver light, the same color as the moon, as the woman's eyes in her dream. They pulsed in rhythm with Randy's heartbeat, growing brighter with each breath she took. And then the voice came not from outside, but from within, from the very ground beneath her feet. "Haven Keeper, you have returned." "I don't understand," Randy said, her voice shaking. "I've never been here before." "Your body is new. Your soul is ancient. How many lifetimes have you walked this path, child? How many times have you built sanctuary from ruin?" The words stirred something deep in Randy's memory, not her memory, exactly, but something older. Flashes of other lives, other times. A woman tending wolves in a mountain cave. Another woman building shelter in a desert oasis. A third standing in this very circle, silver flames dancing in her palms. "I don't have magic," Randy whispered. "You are magic. It flows through your bloodline like a river through stone. Your parents knew. They died to keep the secret safe, to give you time to grow strong enough to claim it." Tears burned in Randy's eyes. "They died in an accident. They died protecting you from those who would have used you, who would have forced your power to wake before you were ready. Your mother's last words were a binding spell, one that locked your magic away until the time was right. And now? Now you stand in the place your ancestors built. Now 7 wolves sleep in the haven you've begun to create. Now the magic recognizes its keeper and asks, "Are you ready to claim what was always yours?" Randy thought about the cabin, about 7 injured shifters who'd stumbled into her life, about the way they'd started to heal, to hope, to believe they might actually survive, about the feeling she got every time she moved through that small space, the certainty that she was doing exactly what she was meant to do. What happens if I say yes? You become what you were born to be. A sanctuary for the lost, a haven for the broken, a place where pack bonds are built not on biology and tradition, but on choice and healing. And if I say no? Silence. Then sadly, then the magic sleeps again, and those 7 wolves will scatter when spring comes, because without a true haven, without a keeper to anchor them, they cannot rebuild what was destroyed. Randy closed her eyes. She thought about Russ, about the way he carried the weight of 43 deaths on his shoulders, about Denise's fierce loyalty despite her own pain, about Drew's quiet competence and Wallace's steady strength, about Glenn, Craig, and Wendell, each one broken in their own way, each one choosing to keep going despite everything. They needed her, and maybe, just maybe, she needed them too. "How do I do it?" she asked. "How do I claim this?" "Speak the words your bloodline has always spoken. Call the magic home." And somehow, impossibly, Randy knew them. They rose from that deep, ancient place inside her, words in a language she'd never learned but had always known. By blood and bone, by choice and will, I claim this haven. I name myself Keeper. I offer sanctuary to the lost, healing to the broken, and home to those who have none. The stones blazed with silver light. Power surged up from the earth, through Randy's feet, racing through her body like wildfire. It didn't hurt. It felt like coming home, like finding a part of herself that had been missing her entire life. She threw her head back and felt the magic pour out of her silver flames that danced across her skin, that rose into the night sky like aurora borealis. The forest responded. Trees bent toward her, acknowledging her claim. The wind sang with voices of ancestors she'd never met but somehow knew. The moon seemed to grow brighter, as if pleased with what it witnessed. And in the distance, from the direction of the cabin, 7 wolves howled. They'd felt it, the shift in the air, the awakening of power. They were calling to her, recognizing what she'd become. Randy opened her eyes when had she closed them, and looked down at her hands. Silver light still flickered across her skin, fading now but visible, real, undeniable. "What am I?" she whispered. "You are what you have always been, a keeper of havens, a builder of sanctuaries. And now finally you are awake." The voice faded, returning to the earth, to the stones, to wherever ancient magic lived when it wasn't speaking to confused omegas in sacred circles. Randy stood alone in the moonlight, trembling with power and possibility and the weight of understanding. She wasn't defective. She never had been. She was just something else entirely. When she returned to the cabin, all 7 of them were awake and standing outside, staring at her with expressions that ranged from awe to fear, to something that might have been hope. "What happened to you?" Russ's voice was rough. "We felt something. A surge of power. It woke all of us." Randy looked at him, at all of them, and realized she couldn't hide this, couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. They'd felt it. They deserved the truth. "I found something in the forest," she said quietly. "A sacred place. A circle of stones." Glenn's breath caught. "The old haven grounds. I've heard stories every pack has them. Places where magic is strongest, where the veil between worlds is thin. But they're just legends. They don't actually—" "They do," Randy interrupted. "And this one is mine." "Yours?" Denise stepped forward, her eyes searching Randy's face. "What do you mean yours?" "I mean, I'm a haven keeper. Apparently, it's a bloodline thing. A type of omega that's rare enough most people think we're extinct. My parents were protecting me from people who would have exploited what I am. And now," she held up her hands, let silver light flicker across her palms for just a moment. "Now I've claimed what was always mine." Silence. Complete and absolute. Then Wendell started laughing. It was a broken sound, half sob, half genuine amusement. Of course we'd stumble into the sanctuary of a mythical omega bloodline. Why would anything about this be normal? "Wendell," Wallace started. "No, it's fine. It's perfect." Wendell looked at Randy with wet eyes. "We're a pack of exiles led by an alpha who lost everything because he tried to do things differently. And we found shelter with an omega who was cast out for being exactly what we needed. If that's not fate, I don't know what is." "It's not fate," Randy said softly. "It's choice. I chose to help you. You chose to trust me. The magic," she gestured vaguely toward the forest, toward the stone circle still pulsing with power in the distance. "The magic just recognized what was already happening." Russ moved closer. Close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes, the way his jaw worked as he processed everything she'd told them. "What does this mean?" he asked. "For us. For whatever we're building here." Randy thought about the dream woman's words, about the vision of wolves gathering in the stone circle, about the deep certainty that had settled in her bones. "It means this cabin isn't just shelter. It's a haven. A place where the lost can find sanctuary, where broken things can heal. The magic will help. It'll make us stronger, help us survive, protect us from threats." She paused. "But only if we all choose it. The magic can't force bonds. It can only amplify what's already there." "And if we choose to leave?" Craig asked quietly. "When spring comes, when we're healed, what then?" "Then you leave," Randy said simply. "You're not prisoners. You're not obligated to stay. But if you choose to stay, if you choose to build something here." She looked at each of them in turn. "Then we're not just surviving anymore. We're creating something new. Something that doesn't follow the old rules about alphas and omegas and pack hierarchy. A haven," Denise said slowly, testing the word. "A place for people who don't fit anywhere else." "Yes, that's dangerous," Glenn said. "If word gets out, if other packs learn there's a haven keeper here, they'll come." Russ finished, his voice grim. "They'll come to exploit the magic, to force bonds, to use what you are. Let them try." The words came out fiercer than Randy intended. "I spent my whole life being told I was worthless because I didn't fit their mold. I'm done letting other people define what I am or what I can do. This is mine. This place, this power, this choice, it's mine." Something shifted in Russ's expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition, one exile seeing another finally claim their worth. "Then we stay," he said. "All of us. We help you build this haven. We protect it. We prove that there's another way." "Russ," Denise started. "No. She's right." He looked at his packmates, his former packmates technically, since they'd lost their bonds when Julian exiled them. "We tried to change things from within, and it got people killed. Maybe it's time to build something entirely new. Something that doesn't repeat the mistakes we've already made." "And when Julian comes looking?" Wallace asked. "Because he will. He won't leave loose ends. Then we'll be ready." Russ's voice was hard. "But that's a problem for another day. Right now, we have a haven to build and a winter to survive." He extended his hand to Randy again, the same gesture from 3 days ago, but weighted with so much more meaning now. "Partners?" he asked. Randy looked at his hand, at the 6 others watching with varying degrees of hope and fear and desperate need for something to believe in. She thought about the stone circle pulsing with silver light, about the voice telling her she'd walked this path before, in other lives, other times, about the certainty that these 7 wolves, this impossible situation, this choice was exactly what she'd been waiting for her entire life. "Partners," she agreed, and took his hand. The mate bond that had been flickering between them since the beginning flared to life. Not complete, not yet, but undeniable. A golden thread connecting her heart to his, singing with possibility and promise and the potential for something neither of them had ever expected to find. Everyone felt it. The shift in the air, the sudden weight of destiny settling over the clearing. "Oh," Denise breathed. "Oh, that's impossible," Glenn finished. "Inevitable," Wendell corrected. And he was smiling now, real and genuine. "It was always going to be this way. We just didn't know it yet." Randy and Russ stood hand in hand under the 3/4 moon, surrounded by 5 wolves who'd become family without anyone quite noticing, and felt the universe rearrange itself around the choice they'd made. The haven had claimed its keeper, and the keeper had claimed her alpha. Everything else, the healing, the building, the inevitable confrontation with the past would come in time. But tonight, under silver moonlight and ancient magic, 7 broken wolves and 1 awakened omega stood together and believed, for the first time in months, that maybe they could actually survive this. Maybe they could even thrive. "So," Drew said, breaking the heavy silence with his usual practical approach. "Anyone else freezing out here, or is it just me?" Laughter rippled through the group, surprised, relieved, human. They filed back into the cabin, into the warmth and light and slowly building sense of home. But Randy lingered on the threshold, looking back at the forest, at the direction where the stone circle waited. "Thank you," she thought, not sure if she was talking to her parents, to the ancient magic, or to fate itself. The wind whispered back soft, approving, satisfied. "You're welcome, Haven Keeper. Now build something worth protecting." And Randy smiled, closed the door, and turned toward 7 wolves who needed her to do exactly that. The real work was just beginning. Chapter 5. The World Fights Back. 2 weeks after Randy claimed the haven, the first strangers arrived. She was outside gathering firewood when she felt them, a disturbance in the air, a wrongness that made her newly awakened magic recoil. 3 shifters, moving through the forest with the confidence of people who owned whatever space they occupied. Randy dropped the wood and ran for the cabin. "We have company," she announced, bursting through the door. 3 of them, coming from the east. Russ was on his feet instantly. The wound in his side mostly healed now, thanks to whatever combination of time, rest, and haven magic had worked on him. Hostile, I don't know, but they don't feel friendly. The others moved with practiced efficiency, Drew and Craig taking positions near the windows, Wallace checking the back exit. Denise stood beside Russ, her body language protective despite the fact that he was the alpha. Was the alpha, Randy corrected herself. They were still figuring out what hierarchy meant here, in this place where old rules didn't quite apply. The knock, when it came, was firm and authoritative. Russ opened the door, and Randy got her first look at the strangers who'd found their haven. 2 men and a woman, all radiating the confidence that came with pack backing. The one in front, tall, dark-haired, with eyes that assessed everything and missed nothing, spoke first. Russ Mercer. Not a question. A statement laden with recognition and something that might have been disappointment. I heard rumors you were dead. Sorry to disappoint. Russ's voice was carefully neutral. Edmund. What brings you to the middle of nowhere? So they knew each other. Randy filed that information away, watching the interplay between them with the attention her Omega instincts demanded. Edmund's gaze swept past Russ, cataloging everyone in the cabin before landing on Randy. His eyes narrowed. Is that? He inhaled deeply, scenting the air. A haven keeper. Here. Impossible. Apparently not, Denise said flatly. Edmund's companions shifted, their body language changing from casual to predatory. The woman, blonde, sharp-featured, dangerous, smiled in a way that made Randy's skin crawl. Well, Edmund said slowly, this changes things considerably. What things? Russ asked. But Randy could hear the tension in his voice. He knew something she didn't. Julian's been looking for you, offering a substantial reward for information about survivors from the coup. Edmund's expression was unreadable. He wants to ensure there are no future challenges to his authority. So you're here to collect? Not a question. I'm here to assess. Edmund's gaze returned to Randy. But finding a haven keeper that's worth more than any bounty Julian could offer. Do you know what the old packs would pay for access to this magic? To a place that could strengthen bonds, heal wounds, create unbreakable sanctuaries. Ice flooded Randy's veins. I'm not for sale. Everything's for sale, sweetheart. It's just a matter of price. Russ moved, putting himself between Edmund and Randy. She's under my protection. You want her, you go through me. Your protection? Edmund laughed, cold and sharp. You're in exile, Russ. You have no pack, no authority, no power to protect anyone. You're barely surviving in this cabin. What? You and your handful of survivors playing house in the woods? We're building something, Randy said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Something that doesn't involve selling people like commodities. How noble. The blonde woman spoke for the first time. And how naive. You think the world will let you keep this? A haven keeper in an unclaimed territory? Every pack within 500 miles will be here within a month of the word getting out. Then we won't let the word get out, Wallace said. Too late. Edmund's smile was predatory. We already know. And we're just the first. Others are coming, Julian's scouts, rival packs, people who've heard whispers about strange magic in the northern woods. This little sanctuary of yours, it's about to become a battleground. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop. Randy felt her magic stirring, responding to the threat, but she didn't know how to use it yet, didn't know if she even could use it to defend against other shifters. Why are you here? Russ asked quietly. Really? If you wanted to collect Julian's bounty, you could have attacked us the moment you arrived. If you wanted to claim Randy, you'd have brought more backup. So what do you actually want, Edmund? Edmund was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he sighed. I want to know if the rumors are true. If you really tried to change how packs operate. If you really died defending that vision. He looked at Russ with something that might have been respect. Our packs weren't friends, but I always thought you had potential. And when Julian sent out word that you'd betrayed your people, that you'd led them to slaughter with your progressive ideas, I didn't believe it. You should have, Russ said bitterly. 43 people died because of my choices. 43 people died because Julian chose to murder them rather than accept change. Edmund's voice was sharp. Don't rewrite history to make yourself the villain, Mercer. You know better. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. You didn't come to turn us in, Denise said slowly. You came to see if what Russ was trying to build was real. I came to see if it's possible. Edmund looked around the cabin, at the 7 survivors who'd somehow managed to not just survive but begin to thrive. My pack were not like Julian's, but we're traditional, rigid. And there are those of us who wonder if there's another way. There is, Randy said. She moved forward, standing beside Russ rather than behind him. The Haven proves it. We're building something here that doesn't follow the old rules, where people are valued for who they are, not what designation they were born with. Pretty words, the blonde woman said. But how do you defend them? How do you protect this place when packs with actual power come calling? We'll figure it out, Glenn said. Will you? Edmund's gaze was sharp. Because I can tell you right now, Julian knows you're alive. He's known for 2 weeks, and he's gathering forces to finish what he started. The words fell like stones into dark water. How many? Russ asked, his voice deadly calm. 20 fighters. Maybe more. He's calling it a cleansing operation, says you're corrupting Omega magic, that you've somehow forced a Haven Keeper to serve you. Edmund's expression was grim. He's spinning a narrative where he's the hero coming to rescue an enslaved Omega from a rogue Alpha. Randy's laugh was sharp and humorless. That's absurd. I chose this. Chose them. No one forced anything. Doesn't matter. Julian's good at manipulation. He'll have half the region believing his version of events before you have a chance to speak. Edmund paused. He's coming in 3 days. Maybe 4 if the weather slows him down. Why are you telling us this? Russ demanded. Because I want to know if you'll fight. Edmund's eyes were intense. If you'll stand for what you believe in. Or if you'll run. Because if you run, if you abandon this haven, the moment things get difficult, then everything you stood for was just talk. But if you fight, he trailed off, something like hope flickering in his expression. If we fight, Randy prompted, then maybe there really is another way, and maybe some of us would be willing to stand with you when the real battle comes. Silence, heavy, weighted with possibility and danger, and the knife's edge between survival and destruction. You'd go against your own pack? Denise asked carefully. I'd support a vision that actually values lives over tradition. Edmund looked at Russ. But I need to know it's real, that you're not just playing at Revolution until the cost gets too high. Russ was quiet for a long moment. Randy could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, the memory of 43 deaths, the fear of leading more people into danger, the temptation to just run and save the few he had left. Then he looked at Randy, and something passed between them. That golden thread of the mate bond, still incomplete but growing stronger every day, pulsed with certainty. We fight, Russ said. We defend what we're building here. Not because I want more blood on my hands, but because running means admitting the old ways were right. That people like Randy, people who don't fit the mold, deserve to be cast out. And I'm done accepting that. Edmund smiled small, real, satisfied. Good. Then you have 3 days to prepare. Make them count. He turned to leave, his companions falling in behind him. But at the door, he paused. One more thing. The stone's the sacred circle. You need to activate its defenses. What defenses? Randy asked. Every haven has them. Protections built into the stones by the keepers who came before. You just need to figure out how to wake them up. His gaze was knowing. You've claimed the haven, but you haven't fully bonded with it yet. Do that before Julian arrives, or you'll be fighting with one hand tied behind your back. And then he was gone, melting into the forest with his companions like ghosts. The cabin erupted. We can't fight 20 trained warriors. We don't have a choice. Maybe we should run, find another place. There is no other place. This is it. Enough. Russ's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone stop, breathe, think. Silence fell, reluctant but complete. We have 3 days, Russ said calmly. 3 days to prepare, to train, to activate whatever defenses the haven has. Drew, Wallace, I need you to scout the perimeter, figure out the best defensive positions. Craig, Glenn, Wendell, weapons. Find whatever we can use, make what we can't find. Denise, I'll inventory supplies, figure out what we need to survive a siege if it comes to that." Her voice was steady. "Good." Russ looked at Randy. "And you need to figure out how to bond with the Haven completely. How to access its full power." "I don't know how." "Then figure it out." His voice softened. "You're the Haven Keeper, Randy. This is your magic, your birthright. Trust your instincts. They've gotten you this far." He was right. She knew he was right. But the weight of responsibility of 7 lives depending on her mastering magic she barely understood threatened to crush her. As if sensing her spiraling thoughts, Russ took her hand. The mate bond flared, warm and reassuring. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Randy looked at him, at this alpha who'd lost everything but somehow still found the strength to believe in something better. At the 6 others who'd chosen to stay despite every reason to run. "Together." She agreed, and felt something shift. Not the magic, not yet, but something just as important. The absolute certainty that whatever was coming, they would face it as a pack. Not a traditional pack, not a pack bound by blood or designation or hierarchy, but a pack bound by choice, by shared purpose, by the belief that broken things could heal if given the right place to do it. The Haven had been claimed. Now, it needed to be defended. That night, Randy returned to the stone circle alone. The moon was nearly full now, bright enough to cast sharp shadows across the snow. The stones rose before her like ancient guardians, their symbols still glowing faintly with silver light. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said to the empty clearing. "I don't know how to fully bond with this place, how to access its defenses, how to protect the people who are depending on me." The wind picked up, carrying voices, whispers of keepers who'd stood in this circle before her, who'd faced their own battles, their own impossible choices. "Trust yourself," they seemed to say. "The magic knows you, you just need to know it back." Randy closed her eyes and reached out, not with her hands, but with that deep, instinctive part of herself that had always known she was different, that had always felt the pull of something larger than herself. The Haven responded immediately. Power rushed up from the earth. But this time it didn't stop at her skin. It went deeper, into her bones, her blood, her very soul. She felt the boundaries of the Haven expanding in her awareness, every tree, every stone, every inch of ground for miles in all directions. She felt the cabin at the center, warm and bright with the lives sheltering there. Felt the edges where the Haven's protection ended and the wild forest began. And she felt the defenses Edmund had mentioned. Ancient magic woven into the very fabric of this place, waiting to be activated. Wards that could turn aside hostile intent, barriers that could shield against attack, protections that had guarded this sanctuary for generations. They were hers now, all of it. The magic, the power, the terrible responsibility of keeping 7 lives safe. "Do you accept this burden?" the ancient voice asked. "Do you bond yourself to this place, knowing you cannot leave it without weakening its power? Knowing you will be tied here as surely as roots bind a tree to earth?" 3 days ago, the question would have terrified her. The idea of being bound to one place, unable to run if things got bad, it would have felt like a cage. But now, with 7 wolves sleeping in her haven, with a mate bond singing in her chest, with the certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. "Yes," Randy said, "I accept. I bond myself to this haven, to its magic, to its purpose. I am its keeper, and I will defend what we're building here." The magic surged, completing the bond in a rush of silver fire that lit up the entire clearing. The stones blazed bright enough to rival the moon, and Randy felt herself become part of something vast and ancient and absolutely certain. She was the haven. The haven was her, inseparable now, bound until death or until she chose to pass the keeping to another. When the light faded, when the magic settled back into the earth and stones, Randy stood in the center of the circle and smiled. She could feel the defenses now, could activate them with a thought, could strengthen or weaken them as needed. Julian was coming with 20 fighters. Let him come. The haven and its keeper would be ready. Randy walked back to the cabin as dawn broke across the snow, painting the world in shades of gold and pink. Russ was waiting on the porch, probably having felt the surge of magic through their bond. "You did it," he said. "Not a question." "I did it," She climbed the steps to stand beside him. The haven is fully bonded now. The defenses are active. When Julian comes, we'll be ready. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Randy let herself lean into his strength. Thank you. For choosing us. For defending what we're building. Thank you for giving me something worth defending. They stood together as the sun rose, as the others began to wake inside. As the 3 days of preparation began, the first clash was coming, and the haven, this impossible sanctuary built by broken wolves and one awakened Omega, was about to prove it could survive more than just the winter cold. It could survive the world's attempts to destroy it. Chapter 6. Whispers Before Dawn. The second night before Julian's arrival, Randy couldn't sleep. She'd spent 2 days watching the others prepare. Drew and Wallace mapping defensive positions, Craig and Glenn fashioning crude weapons from anything they could find, Wendell reinforcing the cabin's weak points. Everyone moved with purpose, with grim determination, with the understanding that in 48 hours, everything might change. But right now, in the quiet hours past midnight, the cabin was still. 7 bodies, breathing in rhythm, exhausted from the day's preparations, and Randy sat by the fire, staring into flames that danced like the silver magic in her veins. You're thinking too loud. Russ's voice came from the shadows near the loft ladder. He descended quietly, moving to sit beside her on the floor in front of the stove. His shoulder brushed hers, deliberate, seeking contact. Sorry, Randy whispered. Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. I haven't really slept since Edmund left. He stared into the fire, his profile sharp in the flickering light. Every time I close my eyes, I see them, the ones who died last time. And I wonder how many more I'll add to that count in 2 days. The raw honesty in his voice made Randy's chest ache. She reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. The mate bond hummed at the contact, warm and reassuring. You're not responsible for their deaths, she said quietly. Julian is. I was their alpha. Their protection was my responsibility. And you did everything you could. You fought for a better way, a kinder way. They died because someone else chose violence over change. Randy squeezed his hand. You can't control other people's choices, Russ. You can only control your own. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, how did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired of letting other people's opinions define my worth. She looked at him, at the exhaustion etched into his features, at the weight he carried alone. You asked me once why I helped you, why I didn't turn you away. You said because someone needed to. That was part of it. But the truth? Randy took a breath. I helped you because I saw myself in you. Someone cast out for not fitting the mold. Someone told they were wrong, broken, defective. And I thought maybe if I can help him, if I can prove that broken things can heal, maybe I can believe I'm not as worthless as they said I was. Russ turned to face her fully, his golden eyes intense. You were never worthless, never broken. You were just waiting to find the place where you belonged. So were you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning and truth, and the growing certainty of what they were becoming to each other. Randy, Russ said, his voice rough. The mate bond. You feel it, don't you? It's getting stronger. Yes. If we complete it, if we actually bond, there's no going back. You'd be tied to me, to this place, to whatever future we manage to build, and that future might be very short if Julian's attack succeeds. Randy studied his face, reading the fear beneath the careful control. Are you asking me not to complete the bond? To keep my options open in case this all falls apart? I'm asking if you're sure. If you really want to tie yourself to a failed alpha with a death wish and a handful of traumatized survivors. You don't have a death wish, Randy said firmly. You have survivor's guilt and PTSD and the weight of 43 ghosts on your shoulders. But you're still here, still fighting, still believing that what we're building matters. Does it matter? The question was raw, vulnerable. Or am I just dragging more people into my mistakes? Randy moved, shifting to face him directly, taking both his hands in hers. The mate bond flared at the increased contact, singing with possibility. Listen to me. What happened to your pack that wasn't a mistake? Fighting for a better way, for valuing people over tradition that wasn't wrong. Julian's response was wrong. The violence was wrong. But your vision? She squeezed his hands. Your vision is the only thing that makes sense. and it's worth defending. Even if defending it gets us all killed, even then. Because at least we'll die standing for something real instead of living on our knees, accepting things we know are wrong. Russ stared at her, and Randy watched something shift in his expression. The careful walls he kept around himself, the ones that held back his grief and fear and desperate hope, began to crack. I see you, he said quietly. All of you. The strength you hide behind that Omega designation. The magic you're still learning to control. The fear that you'll fail us. The determination to try anyway. His thumbs traced circles on the backs of her hands. And I'm terrified of what I feel for you. Because everyone I've loved, everyone I've tried to protect, they end up hurt or dead, or worse. I'm not them, Randy said. I'm not fragile. I'm not helpless. I'm a haven keeper bonded to land that chose me. And I'm choosing you right back, even knowing what it costs, especially knowing what it costs. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the rafters, wind whistled through gaps they hadn't managed to seal. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, relentless, beautiful. Tell me about them, Randy said softly. The ones you lost. Not the numbers or the guilt, tell me who they were. Russ tensed. Randy, you carry them alone. You hold their names like weapons you use to hurt yourself with. But they were people, right? They had lives, dreams, things they loved. She kept her voice gentle. Tell me, let me carry some of that weight with you. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd pull away and retreat behind those careful walls. But then, he took a shaky breath and began to speak. Sarah was 23. She wanted to be a teacher. Used to gather the pack children and tell them stories about the old days. About heroes and magic and justice. His voice was rough. She stood between Julian's people and the young ones when the fighting started. Took a blade meant for a child, died instantly. Randy's throat tightened, but she didn't interrupt. Marcus, damn it. No, not Marcus. I can't use that name. He shook his head. William. William was 60. Oldest member of the pack. Fought in 3 territorial wars and survived them all. He told me once that he stayed with me because I reminded him of his son, the one who'd died young, who'd believed in things like honor and compassion. Russ's hands tightened on hers. Julian's people set the elder house on fire. William was too injured to get out. The names kept coming. Each one, a person, a life. A loss that Russ carried like stones in his pockets. 20 minutes of quiet testimony, of grief spoken aloud for maybe the first time since the massacre. By the time he finished, tears tracked down his face. And Randy's cheeks were wet too. Thank you, she whispered, for trusting me with them. They would have liked you, Russ said. Sarah especially. She always said the pack needed more people who questioned everything, who didn't just accept tradition because it was traditional. She sounds like she was remarkable. She was. He wiped at his face roughly. They all were. And I failed them. No. Randy cupped his face in her hands, making him look at her. You loved them. You fought for them. You tried to save them. The fact that you couldn't save everyone doesn't mean you failed. It means you faced impossible odds and survived anyway. Survival isn't victory. Sometimes it is. Sometimes just living through the nightmare is the bravest thing you can do. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. You survived, Russ. You brought 6 others through hell and got them to safety. You found a haven, literally, and you're building something that honors what those 43 people died for. That's not failure. That's legacy. His breath hitched. You really believe that? With everything I am. They stayed like that. Foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air, the mate bond wrapping around them like a blanket. Not complete, not yet, but growing stronger with every moment of honesty. Every shared vulnerability, every choice to trust despite the fear. I'm scared, Russ admitted. Not of dying. I've made peace with that possibility. But of failing again. Of watching more people I care about die because I wasn't strong enough, smart enough, fast enough to protect them. You're not alone this time, Randy said. You have me. You have the Haven magic. You have 6 wolves who chose to stand with you even knowing the cost. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. And you have time to prepare instead of being ambushed. That's different. That matters. Does it? Can we really stand against 20 trained fighters? I don't know, Randy admitted. But I know we have a better chance together than we would apart. And I know that running, hiding, giving up, that would be the real failure. That would mean everything those 43 people stood for died with them. Russ studied her face like he was memorizing it. Like he was trying to understand how this Omega, this supposedly defective, worthless Omega, had become the thing holding him together. When did you get so brave? He asked. When I stopped believing what other people told me about myself and started believing what I knew in my bones. She smiled, small but real. Turns out, being cast out is either the thing that breaks you, or the thing that proves you were stronger than they thought all along. Which was it for you? Both. Randy's smile widened slightly. I broke. And then I built something better from the pieces. Russ laughed soft, surprised, genuine. That might be the most perfectly you thing you've ever said. I contain multitudes. She was trying for lightness, for a moment of relief in the heavy conversation. But Russ's expression had gone serious again. Randy. After this is over, after we survive or don't survive Julian's attack, we need to talk about the bond. About completing it. About what that means for both of us. Why wait? The words were out before Randy could stop them. Why not now? Why not complete it before the fight? So we go into battle with every advantage we have? Because if I die, if you die bonded to me, at least you'll die knowing someone chose you. Someone saw all your broken pieces and said, yes, this one, this is mine, I want this. Randy's voice was fierce. Isn't that better than dying alone, unbonded, convinced you're not worthy of love? You don't love me. But his voice was uncertain. Don't I? Randy challenged. I've spent 2 weeks watching you carry impossible weight with grace. Watching you put everyone else's needs before your own. Watching you try so hard to be strong for people who need you to be strong. How could I not love that? How could I not want to stand beside someone who believes broken things deserve a chance to heal? Russ's breath caught. Randy, I'm not saying we have to complete the bond tonight. I'm saying don't use the threat of death as an excuse to deny yourself connection. Don't let Julian take one more thing from you before the fight even begins. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything said and unsaid. Then Russ pulled her close, not gently, but desperately, like she was the only solid thing in a world tilting sideways. Randy wrapped her arms around him and held on, feeling his heart racing against her chest, feeling the tremors that meant he was finally letting himself feel everything he'd been holding back. I'm so tired, he whispered into her hair. Tired of fighting, tired of losing, tired of pretending I'm strong enough for this. Then stop pretending, be tired, be scared, be human. Randy ran her hands through his hair, soothing. You don't have to be perfect, Russ. You just have to be real. They held each other in front of the dying fire. Two people who'd been told they weren't enough, discovering that together, they might just be exactly right. Eventually, Russ pulled back enough to look at her. His eyes were red-rimmed but clear, focused. Thank you, he said. For seeing me. For not letting me hide. Thank you for trusting me enough to be seen. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. Whatever happens in 2 days, we face it together. Together, he agreed. And then he kissed her. It wasn't their first kiss, they'd shared a few brief, tentative ones over the past 2 weeks. But this was different. This was a kiss weighted with honesty and vulnerability, and the acknowledgement of everything they'd become to each other. The mate bond flared between them, golden and bright and singing with recognition. Yes, it seemed to say. This is right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Randy rested her head on Russ's shoulder and let herself just be. Not the Haven Keeper. Not the Omega with something to prove. Just Randy, held by someone who saw her and chose her anyway. We should sleep, Russ said eventually. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. More preparations, more training, more anxiety about what's coming. Will you sleep? Randy asked. If you stay with me. If I can feel you breathing beside me. He paused. Is that okay? I don't want to presume. It's more than okay. Randy stood, pulling him up with her. Come on, let's get a few hours before the sun comes up and reality intrudes again. They climbed to the loft together, careful not to wake the others sleeping below. The space was small, the mattress barely big enough for one person, let alone two. But they made it work, curling together under wool blankets, sharing warmth and comfort and the simple gift of not being alone. Randy felt Russ's breathing slow, felt the tension gradually leave his body as exhaustion finally claimed him. The mate bond pulsed between them, not complete, but deeper now. Stronger. We're going to survive this, she thought fiercely. We're going to build something that proves love and choice. And breaking tradition can work. We have to. The Haven magic hummed in agreement, wrapping around the cabin like a protective embrace. Outside, snow continued to fall. Somewhere in the forest, a wolf howled wild and free, and unburdened by pack politics or power struggles. In 2 days, Julian would arrive. But tonight, in this moment, 7 survivors and 1 Haven keeper were safe and warm and together. And that for now was enough. Chapter 7. When brothers collide. Julian arrived at dawn on the 3rd day, and he brought more than 20 fighters. He brought 30. Randy felt them before she saw them, a disturbance in the Haven's magic like stones thrown into still water. She was outside reinforcing the wards around the cabin when the sensation hit, making her stumble. "They're here," she called out, her voice cutting through the morning quiet. "North side." More than we expected. The others poured out of the cabin, weapons in hand, faces grim. Russ moved to stand beside her, and Randy felt the mate bond pulse with shared determination and fear. 30, she said quietly. He brought 30. Then we fight 30. Russ's voice was steady, but she could feel his terror through the bond. Not for himself, for them. For her. The line of shifters emerged from the tree line like ghosts materializing from mist. They moved in formation, trained, disciplined, deadly, and at their center walked a man who could have been Russ's twin, if not for the cruelty in his eyes and the sneer on his lips. "Julian, brother," he called out, his voice carrying across the snow. "I'm disappointed. I expected you to run, to take your little collection of failures and disappear into the wilderness like the coward you've always been." Russ didn't respond, didn't give Julian the reaction he was clearly fishing for. Julian's smile widened. "Still playing the strong, silent alpha? Even now, when you're outnumbered 4-1? He gestured to his fighters. "These are loyal pack members, real wolves who understand what it means to follow tradition, to respect hierarchy. Not like the traitors you surrounded yourself with." "They're not traitors," Russ said quietly. "They're survivors, people who refuse to accept that might makes right. Might does make right. That's the way of our kind. The strong lead, the weak follow." Julian's gaze shifted to Randy, and she felt his attention like oil on her skin. "And speaking of the weak, is this her? The defective Omega you've somehow convinced to play house with you?" Randy stepped forward before Russ could stop her. "I'm Randy Sawyer, and I'm not defective. I'm a Haven keeper. This land chose me, these people chose me, and you have no power here." Julian laughed cold and sharp as winter wind. "A Haven keeper. How delightfully convenient. Tell me, little Omega, did my brother explain what he did to claim you? How he used your designation against you, played on your need to be useful, to be valued?" "He did nothing of the sort." "No? Then why are you here, in the middle of nowhere, with 7 broken wolves who should have died in the coup? Out of the goodness of your heart?" Julian's smile was cruel. "Or because an alpha with nothing left decided to use whatever tools he could find, including a lonely, desperate Omega, to rebuild his shattered ego?" The words hit like physical blows. Randy felt doubt creep in, cold and insidious. Was that what this was? Had Russ seen her as a tool, a means to an end? "No," the mate bond insisted. "Feel him. Feel the truth." She did. She felt Russ's fury at Julian's words, his protective rage, his desperate fear that she might believe the lies. The bond didn't lie. Couldn't lie. "You're wrong," Randy said firmly. "We chose each other, built something together. You wouldn't understand that you only know how to take and destroy." Touching. Julian's expression hardened. "But ultimately irrelevant. Russ, I'll make this simple. Surrender yourself for judgment. Release the Omega from whatever manipulation you've used on her. And I'll let your people live. Refuse, and we'll kill all of you, and take the Haven Keeper anyway. She's not property to be taken, Denise snarled from behind them. Everything is property if you're strong enough to claim it. Julian gestured, and his fighters moved forward, spreading out in a semicircle that would surround the cabin if they weren't stopped. Randy felt the Haven magic surge in response to the threat. The wards she'd spent 2 days strengthening flared to life, invisible barriers that would slow the attackers, confuse their senses, make every step toward the cabin feel like wading through water. The first line of Julian's fighters hit the wards and stumbled, confusion flashing across their faces. "What is this?" one of them demanded. "Magic," Randy said. "Haven magic. You're not welcome here. The land itself rejects you." Julian's eyes narrowed. "Break through it. Now." His fighters surged forward, and Randy felt the wards strain under the assault. 30 bodies pushing against magic meant for smaller threats. The barriers would hold, but not forever. "Russ," she said quietly, "we can't fight them all, even with the wards." "I know." His voice was grim. "Julian, let's talk. Just you and me. Leave them out of it." "Why would I do that when I have every advantage?" "Because you want to prove you're better than me. Stronger, more worthy of leading." Russ stepped forward, away from the others. "So prove it. 1-on-1. You win, we surrender. I win. You leave and never come back." Julian considered this, head tilted like a predator sizing up prey. "And if I refuse? Then you're a coward hiding behind numbers, and everyone here will know it." The insult hit its mark. Randy saw Julian's jaw tighten, saw the rage flash in his eyes. He was an alpha pride, and reputation mattered almost as much as power. "Fine," Julian said. "But when I kill you, your people swear loyalty to me or die. And the Omega comes with me regardless. No deal." Randy started. "Agreed," Russ said. "Russ." He turned to face her, and the mate bond pulsed with meaning. "Trust me. I have a plan. Trust me." Randy wanted to argue, wanted to scream that she wouldn't let him sacrifice himself, that this was insane, but she felt his determination through the bond, felt his certainty that this was the only way. "I trust you," she whispered. "But if you die, I'm going to kill you." His smile was brief but real. Then he turned back to Julian, and walked forward, out beyond the wards, into the open snow between the cabin and the line of 30 hostile wolves. Julian met him halfway, circling like the predator he was. "This is how it should have been from the beginning," Julian said. "A proper challenge. Alpha to alpha. No politics, no debate, just strength proving dominance." "This isn't about dominance," Russ replied. "It's about you being so terrified of change that you'd rather murder innocent people than adapt." "They weren't innocent. They were complicit in your destruction of tradition, of everything that makes us strong." Julian lunged without warning, faster than Randy expected. But Russ was ready. He sidestepped, using Julian's momentum against him, landing a blow to his brother's ribs that made Julian grunt. The fight that followed was brutal. These weren't shifters in wolf form, this was human combat, hands and fists and the occasional blade pulled from hidden sheaths. Randy watched with her heart in her throat as Russ traded blows with his brother, as blood began to stain the snow, as both men pushed themselves beyond exhaustion into the realm of pure will. Julian was faster, younger, less injured from previous battles, but Russ fought with the desperation of someone who had everything to lose, and nothing left to give except this one last stand. "You were always weak," Julian snarled, landing a hit that sent Russ stumbling. "Father knew it. I knew it. The pack knew it. You cared too much about feelings, about fairness, about people who didn't matter. Everyone matters," Russ gritted out, catching Julian's next punch and twisting, using leverage to throw his brother off balance. "That's what you never understood. Strength without compassion is just cruelty, and compassion without strength is just weakness." They crashed together again, a tangle of violence and fury, and decades of resentment boiling over. Randy felt every blow through the mate bond. Felt Russ's pain, his determination, his growing exhaustion. He was holding his own, but barely, and Julian showed no signs of tiring. "He's going to lose," she thought with horror. "He's going to die, and I'm going to watch it happen." The Haven magic pulsed urgently, as if trying to tell her something. Randy reached for it instinctively. And information flooded her mind, ancient knowledge, keeper wisdom passed down through generations. The bond, the magic whispered. Complete the bond, give him your strength. But completing a mate bond in the middle of combat was insane. It required focus, intimacy, mutual consent. He already consented. You already consented. You just have to choose it. Now, before it's too late. Randy looked at Russ. At the man who'd opened his heart to her despite every reason not to. Who'd shared his grief, and his hope, and his desperate belief that broken things could heal. She chose. The mate bond, which had been incomplete, hovering, waiting, suddenly snapped into place. Randy gasped as power flooded through the connection. Not just emotional connection now, but actual physical bonding. She felt Russ's strength, his pain, his determination, as if they were her own. And through the bond, she pushed her own strength back to him. Haven magic, Omega resilience, the certainty that he was not alone in this fight. Russ stumbled, his eyes going wide as he felt the bond complete. Julian saw the moment of distraction and went for the kill, a blade appearing in his hand, aimed straight for Russ's heart. Time seemed to slow. Randy screamed, reaching out through the bond, through the Haven magic, through every ounce of power she possessed. And the Haven responded. Silver light exploded from the ground beneath Russ's feet, forming a barrier between him and Julian's blade. The weapon bounced off with a sound like bells, and Julian was thrown backward, landing hard in the snow. What? Julian scrambled to his feet, staring at the silver barrier now surrounding Russ. That's not possible. Haven magic doesn't work that way. It's defensive, territorial, not— It works however the keeper needs it to work, Randy said, stepping forward even though her legs shook. And right now, I need it to protect my mate. The word hung in the air, mate, heavy with meaning and power, and the weight of a completed bond. Julian's face twisted with rage. You bonded. In the middle of a challenge. That's cheating. That's love, Russ said, his voice stronger now, steadier. That's choosing someone because they matter, because they're worth fighting for, something you've never understood. He moved forward, and Randy realized with shock that he was healing. The cuts and bruises from the fight were closing, fading, as Haven magic poured through the mate bond and into his body. Julian saw it too, saw the advantage slipping away. Attack! He screamed to his 30 fighters. Kill them all, now! The fighters surged forward, but they weren't alone. Edmund stepped out of the tree line with 20 wolves of his own. I don't think so, Edmund said calmly. This challenge was supposed to be one-on-one. You're the one breaking the rules, Julian. Not them. Julian spun, betrayal and fury warring on his face. You dare. I dare. Edmund's voice was hard. I've watched you twist tradition to serve your own ambitions. Watched you call murder justice. Watched you demonize anyone who questioned your authority. I'm done pretending you're anything but a tyrant. Traitor. Revolutionary, Edmund corrected. There's a difference. Julian's forces hesitated, caught between their alpha's orders and the sudden shift in numbers. 30 against 8 had been overwhelming odds. 30 against 28 was much less certain. You're making a mistake, Julian said, his voice cold. All of you. That Omega has corrupted my brother. Twisted Haven magic into something unnatural. She's dangerous. She's remarkable, Edmund interrupted. She's built something in 2 weeks that your entire pack couldn't build in years. A place where people actually want to be, where they're valued for who they are, not just what designation they were born with. That's not corruption. That's evolution. It's an abomination. It's the future. Edmund looked at Russ, at Randy. And some of us would rather stand with the future than cling to a past that only works for those at the top. Julian's expression went cold, calculating. Then you'll die with them. He lunged at Russ again, and this time it wasn't a fair fight. It was assassination, fast, brutal, aimed to kill before anyone could react. But Randy was bonded now. She felt Julian's intention through her connection to the Haven, through the way the land itself recoiled from his malice. She raised her hands, and silver fire erupted from her palms. Not metaphorical fire. Actual flames, silver and bright and burning with ancient power. They struck Julian mid-lunge, wrapping around him like chains, holding him suspended in the air. Everyone froze. Julian's fighters, Edmund's wolves, the 7 survivors who thought they knew what Randy was capable of. No one had expected this. "Let me go," Julian snarled, struggling against the flames that held him. "You can't, this is exactly what I am," Randy said, and her voice echoed with the voices of every haven keeper who'd come before her. "I am sanctuary for the lost. I am protection for the chosen. And I am judgment for those who would destroy what we're building." The silver flames tightened, and Julian screamed. Randy Russ's voice was careful. "What are you doing?" Good question. What was she doing? The magic had taken over, responding to threat with overwhelming force. But Randy could feel the choice beneath the power. She could kill Julian right now, end the threat permanently, make sure he never hurt anyone again. It would be so easy. So justified, so exactly like the violence she'd been fighting against. "No," Randy said, more to herself than to anyone else. "No, that's not who we are. That's not what this place is for." She loosened the flames, lowering Julian back to the ground but keeping him bound. "You came here to destroy us," she said. "To kill my mate, to take me as property, to punish people for daring to believe in something different. But I'm not going to kill you for it. Because that would make me just like you, someone who uses power to destroy instead of to build. Then what? You're exiled. From this territory, from this haven, from any protection the magic offers. You and anyone who chooses to follow you." Randy's voice was firm. "Go back to your pack. Live with your traditions. But leave us alone. And if you ever come back..." The flames flickered warningly. "The haven will not be so merciful a second time." She released the magic, and Julian dropped to the snow, coughing, singed but alive. For a moment, he just stared at her with something that might have been fear or respect or hatred, maybe all 3. Then he stood, pulled what remained of his dignity around himself, and turned to his fighters. "We're leaving," he said flatly. "Alpha," one of them protested. Now, they left. 30 wolves retreating into the forest. Their plans of dominance and destruction shattered by one Omega who'd learned to claim her power. When they were gone, when the forest had swallowed them completely, Randy's legs gave out. Russ caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her close, supporting her weight as the reality of what had just happened crashed over both of them. "You saved us," he whispered into her hair. "You saved all of us." "We saved each other," Randy corrected. She looked up at him, at this alpha who'd become her mate, her partner, her choice, the bond. "I felt it. You were going to die, and I couldn't let that happen. So you completed it. In the middle of a fight, while I was busy getting my ass kicked by my brother." He laughed, slightly hysterical. "That's the most impulsive, terrifying, perfect thing you could have done. Did it work? Did it, Randy? You channeled Haven magic through our mate bond to heal me in real time and then manifested silver flames to subdue a hostile alpha." "Yes, it worked." Edmund approached cautiously, his 20 wolves hanging back. "Well, that was certainly something." Russ turned, still holding Randy. "Thank you for coming, for standing with us. Thank you for proving it was possible. To build something different. To make it work." Edmund's expression was serious. "Julian will be back. Maybe not tomorrow or next month, but eventually. He doesn't forgive, doesn't forget. Let him come," Randy said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "The haven will be ready. We'll be ready." Edmund smiled, real and warm. "I believe you will be. In the meantime," he gestured to his wolves. "Some of us would like to learn more about this place you're building. If you're willing to share." Randy looked at Russ, a question in her eyes. He nodded. "You're welcome here," Randy said. "Anyone who comes in peace, who believes people deserve more than just survival, you're welcome." And as Edmund's wolves began to approach, as the 7 survivors emerged from their defensive positions, as the sun climbed higher in the sky and painted the blood-stained snow with gold, Randy felt the haven settle around them like a blessing. They'd survived. More than survived, they'd proven that what they were building was worth defending. The hardest test was over. Now the real work could begin. Chapter 8. The Keeper Rises. 3 weeks after Julian's defeat, the haven had transformed. What started as 7 survivors in a barely habitable cabin had grown into something Randy barely recognized. Edmund's wolves hadn't just visited, 15 of them had stayed, choosing to build something new rather than return to the rigid hierarchies they'd known. They'd helped expand the cabin, adding 2 additional structures that formed a small compound around the central building. They'd organized hunting parties, established supply lines, and begun the work of turning a desperate shelter into an actual community. But the real transformation was happening in the stone circle. Randy stood there now, 3 hours past midnight, letting haven magic flow through her like water through a riverbed. Each night she came here, and each night she understood more about what it meant to be a haven keeper. The power wasn't just offensive, it was creative, generative, magic that could shape the land itself if directed properly. Tonight, she was trying something new. Silver flames danced between her palms, controlled now, precise. Nothing like the wild burst that had subdued Julian. She directed the energy downward, into the earth, feeling for the patterns the ancient keepers had left behind. Blueprints, essentially. Instructions for how to expand the haven's boundaries, strengthen its protections, create spaces for more people to shelter. Because more people were coming. Word had spread despite their best efforts at secrecy. Whispers of a place where designation didn't define worth, where pack bonds were built on choice rather than biology, where an omega wielded power that rivaled the strongest alphas. Exiles, outcasts, and rebels were making their way through the wilderness, drawn by hope or desperation, or the simple need to see if the rumors were true. 23 new arrivals in 3 weeks, and more coming every day. The haven was growing faster than Randy had prepared for. "You're pushing too hard." Russ's voice came from the edge of the stone circle. He'd started appearing whenever she stayed out too late, keeping watch, offering quiet support. The mate bond hummed with his concern, his pride, his ever-present fear that she was taking on too much. "I'm fine," Randy said, not stopping the flow of magic. "The haven needs to expand. We can't keep cramming people into 3 buildings meant for maybe 15 wolves. We also can't afford for you to burn yourself out." He moved closer, and Randy felt his presence like warmth against her back. "You've been out here every night this week. You barely sleep. You barely eat. You're running yourself into the ground, trying to be everything for everyone. That's literally my job. Haven Keeper. Keeper of the Haven. It's in the title. Your job is to maintain the magic, not to sacrifice yourself to it." His hands settled on her shoulders, grounding. "Randy, look at me." She let the magic fade, turning to face him. He looked worried, the kind of deep, bone-level worry that came through their bond like static electricity. "I'm not sacrificing myself," she said quietly. "I'm building what needs to be built." "There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I stand it looks like you're trying to prove you're worthy of this power by working yourself to death." The words hit harder than they should have. Randy pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. I'm not. You are." Russ's voice was gentle but firm. "You spent your whole life being told you weren't enough. That your designation made you worthless. And now you have power, real, undeniable power, and you're trying to earn it. To prove you deserve it." "Don't I have to prove it?" Randy's voice cracked. "Everyone here chose to come because of the haven, because of what I can do. If I fail them, if I can't expand the protections fast enough, if someone gets hurt because I wasn't strong enough, then we deal with it together, as a community, as partners." He moved closer, cupping her face in his hands. "You're not responsible for every life here. You're not their savior or their deity. You're a person with a gift, and you need to learn to share the burden instead of carrying it alone." "I don't know how," Randy whispered. "My whole life, the only person I could rely on was me. Depending on others meant disappointment, meant abandonment. I don't know how to trust that people will stay, that they won't leave when things get hard. Then let me teach you." His thumbs brushed away tears she didn't realize she was crying. "Let us teach you. Because you're not alone anymore, Randy. You have a mate. You have a pack. You have people who chose to be here not because of what you can do for them, but because of who you are." The words settled over her like a blanket, warm and solid and terrifyingly vulnerable to accept. "What if I let you in and you leave anyway? The question was small, scared, the voice of a 12-year-old who'd lost her parents and learned that love meant loss. Then I leave, Russ said simply. And it'll hurt, and you'll survive it, and life will go on. But Randy. He pressed his forehead to hers, and the mate bond pulsed with absolute certainty. I'm not leaving. Not by choice. You're stuck with me until one of us dies, and even then, I'll probably haunt you just to make sure you're eating properly. A laugh bubbled up despite the tears. You'd be the most annoying ghost. Absolutely. I'd hide your boots and rearrange your spell components, and make passive-aggressive comments about your work-life balance. I don't have spell components. You would if you were a proper witch. We need to work on your aesthetic. Randy laughed again, and this time it felt real, genuine. The kind of laughter that came from exhaustion and relief, and the simple gift of being understood. I'm terrified, she admitted. Of failing. Of not being enough. Of building something beautiful just to watch it fall apart. Me too. Russ pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Every single day, I wake up terrified that I'll make the wrong choice, say the wrong thing, lead us all into disaster. But we keep going anyway. Because the alternative, giving up, running away, letting fear win, that's worse than any failure we could face. They stood like that for a long moment. Two people who'd been broken by the world finding strength in being broken together. Then the Haven magic pulsed, urgent. Warning. Randy's head snapped up. Something's wrong. What? Someone's here, at the boundary, and there. She reached for the magic, reading the disturbance. They're dying. They ran. Through the forest, back toward the main compound, following the pull of Haven magic toward the eastern boundary. The others were already there, Denise organizing a perimeter. Wallace and Drew helping someone inside the wards. Not someone. 3 someones. 2 adults carrying a child between them, all 3 covered in blood and barely conscious. Get them inside, Randy commanded, her Haven Keeper authority making the words a compulsion. Now, Denise, I need medical supplies. Wallace, hot water. Drew, I'm on it, Drew said, already moving. They carried the 3 strangers into the main building, laying them on makeshift beds near the central fire. Randy's hands moved on autopilot, assessing wounds, determining priorities. The child, a girl, maybe 8 years old, had a deep gash across her shoulder. One of the adults, a woman, had been clawed across her ribs. The other, a man, had a leg wound that was infected and spreading. What happened to them? Denise asked. Bringing supplies. I don't know. But we need to stabilize them before we can ask questions. Randy pressed her hands to the child's wound, letting Haven magic flow through her fingers. It wasn't healing. Exactly, she couldn't knit flesh back together or cure infections with a thought. But she could ease pain, slow bleeding, give their bodies the strength to fight. It took hours. By the time the 3 strangers were stable, the sun was rising, and Randy was so exhausted she could barely stand. But they were alive, breathing, safe within the Haven's protection. Who are they? Glenn asked quietly. I don't know, Randy said. But they came here for help. That's enough. The woman woke first, 3 hours later. Her eyes opened brown, scared, defiant, and locked on Randy. You're the Haven Keeper, she rasped. I am. And you're safe here. Whatever you're running from can't reach you. They'll come. The woman struggled to sit up, wincing. The Broken Fang Pack. They'll come for us. For my daughter. For she looked at the sleeping child, and her expression cracked. Please, please don't send us back. They'll kill her. They'll kill all of us. We're not sending you anywhere, Russ said firmly. But we need to know what we're dealing with. Who's the Broken Fang Pack? Mercenaries. Wolves who hire themselves out to the highest bidder. The woman's voice was bitter. My mate. She gestured to the unconscious man. He refused to participate in a raid they were planning. Said it was wrong to attack families, to take children as leverage. So they branded him traitor. Tried to execute all of us. You escaped, Denise said. Barely. We've been running for 2 weeks. Heard rumors of a haven. A place where exiles could find sanctuary. I didn't dare hope it was real. Tears tracked down her face. But you are. You're real. Randy took the woman's hand. You're safe now. I promise. The haven protects its own. We're not yours yet. We haven't sworn loyalty, haven't been accepted. You're here, you asked for help. That makes you ours. Randy's voice was firm. That's how this works. Anyone who comes in peace, who needs sanctuary, they're welcome. The woman started crying in earnest, then great, heaving sobs of relief and exhaustion, and the kind of emotion that came from being saved when you'd given up hope. Russ pulled Randy aside while Denise comforted the woman. Broken Fang Pack, he said quietly. I know them. They're brutal, efficient, and they don't take rejection well. How long before they get here? If they're tracking these 3 days, maybe less. His jaw tightened. And they'll come in force. Not like Julian's challenge, this will be a raid. Fast, violent, meant to take what they want and disappear. Then we prepare. Randy looked around at their compound. 23 new arrivals, most of them traumatized, half of them not fighters. We show them what happens when you threaten a haven. Randy, no. She turned to face him fully. You're right. I've been pushing myself too hard, trying to be everything for everyone. But this is exactly what the haven is for. Protecting people who need protection. Standing between the vulnerable and those who would hurt them. If we can't do that, then what's the point of any of this? Russ studied her face, and she felt his assessment through the bond, checking if this was determination or martyrdom, strength or desperation. Okay, he said finally. Then we fight, but we fight smart. Edmund, he called across the compound. We need to talk strategy. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. Edmund's wolves, who'd been integrating peacefully, suddenly revealed combat training that made Randy realize how much they'd been holding back. They organized defensive positions, trained the willing newcomers, and helped Randy map the haven's magical boundaries to find weak points that needed reinforcement. And Randy worked on something new. If the Broken Fang Pack was coming for the child for leverage, for revenge, for whatever twisted reason mercenaries had, then Randy needed to make sure they understood exactly what they were facing. She returned to the stone circle on the second night, and this time, she didn't just touch the magic, she claimed it fully. I am Randy Sawyer, she said to the ancient stones, to the magic humming in the earth, to the spirits of keepers who'd come before. I am haven keeper of this sanctuary, and I claim my full power, not just defensive wards, not just healing touch, everything, every tool, every weapon, every gift this bloodline carries, because my people are in danger, and I will not let them fall. The magic answered with a surge that felt like coming home and being reborn at the same time. Power flooded through her, not overwhelming, but right. She felt the boundaries of the haven expand, felt new protections snap into place, felt the very land recognize her claim and respond with fierce approval. When she opened her eyes, silver light radiated from her skin like moonlight made solid. Okay then, she whispered. Let's see what a fully empowered Havenkeeper can do. She raised her hands, and the earth responded. Roots burst from the ground at the haven's eastern boundary, not random, but deliberate, forming a wall, a barrier of living wood that would slow any attack, channel invaders into kill zones, give her people every advantage. She directed the magic north, where the terrain was too open. Stone rose from beneath the snow, ancient rock responding to her call, creating natural fortifications that looked like they'd been there for centuries. She worked through the night, reshaping the heavens' defenses, turning their sanctuary into a fortress that could weather any storm. When dawn broke, when she finally returned to the compound, exhausted but satisfied, she found everyone staring at her. What? She asked. You're glowing, Denise said flatly. Actually, literally glowing. There's silver light coming off you like you swallowed the moon. Randy looked down at her hands. Sure enough, faint silver light still flickered across her skin. Huh. That's new. That's terrifying, Glenn muttered. In a good way, I think. The defenses are ready, Randy said. When the Broken Fang comes, they'll find this haven much harder to crack than they expected. When do you think they'll arrive? Wallace asked. As if in answer, a howl echoed through the forest, then another, then a dozen more. Now, Russ said grimly. They arrive now. The Broken Fang pack emerged from the trees like shadows given form. 15 wolves, all battle-scarred, all moving with the confidence of mercenaries who'd never failed a contract. Their leader, a massive gray wolf with a torn ear, shifted to human form as he approached the Haven's boundary. "We're here for the traitors," he called out. "Send them out, and we'll leave in peace." "No," Randy said simply. She stood at the boundary, backed by Russ and every able fighter they had. "They're under Haven protection." "You can't have them," the mercenary laughed. "Haven protection? Is that supposed to scare us? We've raided Pact territories, Omega sanctuaries, even Alpha strongholds. Your little magical cabin won't stop us." "This isn't a cabin anymore," Randy said. And she let the full weight of her power show, silver light blazing from her skin, the earth itself trembling with barely contained energy. "This is a haven, my haven. And you're not welcome here." The mercenary's smile faltered. "Just slightly. Just enough. Last chance," he said. "Give us the traitors, or we take them by force." Randy smiled, sharp and cold and absolutely certain. Try. They tried. And the Haven showed them exactly what happened when predators threatened a Haven Keeper's chosen people. Chapter 9. Sanctuary Earned. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Not because the Broken Fang Pack was weak, they were trained, vicious, and experienced, but because they'd never faced a fully empowered Haven Keeper defending her chosen ground. The moment they crossed the boundary, the Haven responded. Roots erupted from the earth, wrapping around legs and arms, pulling attackers down into the snow. The stone walls Randy had raised the night before channeled the mercenaries into narrow paths where Edmund's trained fighters waited, and through it all, silver light pulsed across the battlefield like a heartbeat, disorienting the invaders, making every step feel like wading through quicksand. Randy stood at the center of it all, hands raised, directing the magic with a precision that surprised even her. She didn't kill, refused to, even when the opportunity presented itself, but she immobilized, disarmed, and systematically dismantled every advantage the mercenaries thought they had. The gray leader with the torn ear was the last one standing. He stared at Randy with something between rage and fear. "What are you?" he demanded. "I'm the line you don't cross," Randy said. Silver flames flickered in her palms, a reminder, a warning. "I'm the sanctuary for people you'd hurt. I'm the keeper of a place where broken things come to heal. And I'm done letting people like you decide who deserves protection and who doesn't. The contract is void. You failed. Your target is safe. And if you're smart, you'll take your people and leave before I decide that exile isn't punishment enough." For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd make one last desperate attack, force her to do something she'd regret. Then he looked at his packmates, all 15 of them bound by roots and magic, all thoroughly defeated, and made the smart choice. "We're leaving," he said. "But this isn't over. People will hear about this place. About what you are. They'll come. Let them." Randy's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Let everyone know there's a haven that actually protects its people, that stands against mercenaries and tyrants, and anyone who thinks might makes right. Maybe it'll give other keepers courage to claim their power too." The mercenary stared at her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled, bitter but genuine. "You're going to change everything, aren't you?" "I'm going to try." He nodded once, a gesture of respect from one warrior to another. Then he gathered his defeated packmates and melted back into the forest, leaving behind only trampled snow and the echo of howls fading into distance. When they were gone, when the forest had swallowed them completely, Randy's legs gave out. Russ caught her, of course he did. He was always there when she fell and pulled her close. "You did it," he whispered. "You defended the haven. Proved it's more than just pretty words and hope." "We did it," Randy corrected, her voice muffled against his chest. "You organized the defense. Edmund trained the fighters. Everyone stood together. I just channeled the magic. You were magnificent." He pulled back enough to look at her, and the mate bond pulsed with pride and love and awe. Terrifying and brilliant and absolutely magnificent. Around them, the compound erupted in celebration. People who'd been holding their breath for 2 days, suddenly laughing, crying, embracing. The woman they'd rescued, her name was Sandy. Randy had learned, held her daughter close and wept with relief. Edmund's wolves clapped each other on the back, grinning with the satisfaction of a battle well fought. They'd won. More than won, they'd proven something. That the haven was real. That it could be defended. that choosing compassion over cruelty didn't make you weak. Come on, Denise said, appearing beside them with her usual practical efficiency. You need food, water, and about 12 hours of sleep. In that order. I'm fine. You're running on fumes and stubbornness. Denise's voice was fond but firm. And you've done enough for one day. Let us take care of you for once. Randy wanted to argue, wanted to check on the wounded, reinforce the wards, make sure everyone was settled. But exhaustion was pulling at her with irresistible weight, and the mate bond was practically screaming Russ's concern. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Maybe I could use some rest. They helped her inside, settled her near the fire with warm food and warmer blankets. People kept stopping by thanking her, touching her hand, offering quiet words of gratitude. Sandy brought her daughter over, the girl's shoulder bandaged but healing. Thank you, Sandy said. For standing for us. For proving we were worth defending. You were always worth defending, Randy said. You just needed someone to see it. The little girl, her name was Addie, shy and serious, suddenly threw her arms around Randy's neck. You're like the heroes in Mama's stories, she whispered. The ones who fight monsters and save people. Randy's throat tightened. I'm not a hero, sweetie. I'm just someone who had power and decided to use it for something good. That's what heroes do, Addie said, with the absolute certainty of an 8-year-old who knew truth when she heard it. After the child and her mother left, after the celebration had quieted to comfortable conversation and the exhausted satisfaction of survival, Russ pulled Randy outside. The moon was full now, bright and cold and beautiful. The compound stretched below them, transformed from desperate shelter to actual community in the space of 3 weeks. New buildings. New people. New hope. Look at what you've built, Russ said quietly. What we've built, Randy corrected. I didn't do this alone. No. But you made it possible. You gave us a place to build it. He turned to face her fully, and the moonlight painted his features in silver and shadow. Randy. I need to tell you something. The mate bond pulsed with nervous energy. Randy's heart jumped. What is it? I love you. The words were simple, direct, weighted with absolute truth. Not because you're a haven keeper, not because you saved my life or defended our people, or channeled incredible magic. I love you because you're stubborn and compassionate, and you refuse to accept that broken things can't heal. Because you see the best in people even when they can't see it themselves. Because you make me believe that maybe, just maybe, I'm not defined by my failures. Tears blurred Randy's vision. Russ, I know we're bonded. I know the mate connection means we're tied together regardless. But I wanted you to know. I choose you. Deliberately. Consciously. Not because fate decided it, but because you're the person I want to stand beside for however long we have, even though I'm difficult and stubborn and have no idea what I'm doing half the time, especially because of that. He smiled, real and warm and so full of love it hurt to look at. You're my mate, Randy. But more than that, you're my partner. My equal. The person who sees my broken pieces and doesn't try to fix them, just accepts that they're part of who I am. I love you too, Randy said, the words spilling out like they'd been waiting for permission. I love that you carry 43 ghosts and still find the strength to be gentle. I love that you believe in people even after they betrayed you. I love that you're terrified of failing but you show up anyway, every single day, trying to be better than you were yesterday. We're a mess, Russ said, laughing through what might have been tears. We're a perfect mess, Randy corrected. The kind that works because we're broken in complementary ways. He pulled her close and kissed her, not the desperate, frantic kisses of the battle, but something deeper, slower. A kiss that tasted like coming home and promises kept and the future they were building together. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Randy rested her forehead against his. What happens now? She asked. We've defended the haven once, but Edmund was right, Julian will come back. Other threats will emerge. We can't just hide here forever. No. But we can build something strong enough that when threats come, we're ready. Russ looked out over the compound. We train. We expand. We find other exiles, other outcasts, other people who don't fit the traditional molds. We prove that there's another way. A revolution, Randy said slowly. A sanctuary, Russ corrected. Revolutions are violent, sanctuaries are persistent. We're not trying to overthrow the old ways, we're just building something new beside them and letting people choose. Some people will see that as a threat. Let them. His voice was firm. We're not backing down. We're not running. We're standing here and saying, this is possible, this is real. And you can't make us pretend otherwise. Randy smiled against his chest. When did you get so revolutionary? When I found a mate who refused to accept that the world has to stay broken. He kissed the top of her head. You changed me, Randy. Made me believe that losing didn't mean I was a failure, it just meant I hadn't found the right approach yet. You changed me too, Randy admitted. Made me believe I was worth more than my designation. That my magic wasn't something to be ashamed of or exploited, but something to be claimed and used. They stood together under the full moon. Two people who'd been broken by a world that didn't understand them, now choosing each other and building something that would shelter others like them. Behind them, the compound settled into sleep. 23 refugees, 7 original survivors, 15 of Edmund's wolves, and 2 leaders who'd found each other in the middle of a frozen wilderness and decided that was exactly where they belonged. I'm scared, Randy admitted quietly. Of what comes next. Of the responsibility. Of the threats we haven't seen yet. Me too. Russ's arms tightened around her. But we're scared together. And that makes all the difference. Together, Randy agreed. And felt the Haven magic pulse with approval, wrapping around them like a blessing. 3 days later, the council meeting was Denise's idea. If we're actually building a community, she'd said, we need structure, not hierarchy structure. People need to know who's responsible for what, how decisions get made, how conflicts get resolved. So they gathered the 7 original survivors, Edmund representing his wolves, Sandy speaking for the rescued families, and Randy and Russ at the center. We're not a traditional pack, Russ began. We've proven that. But we do need organization. Guidelines. A way to make sure everyone's voice gets heard. I propose a council, Edmund said. Representatives from different groups within the Haven. Decisions made by consensus when possible, by majority vote when necessary. And the Haven Keeper? Wallace asked, looking at Randy. What's her role? Everyone turned to Randy. She felt the weight of their attention, their hope, their need for her to have answers. I'm not a leader, she said carefully, not in the traditional sense. My magic protects the Haven, maintains the wards, helps with healing. But I'm not equipped to make decisions about governance or policy or day-to-day operations. But you should have veto power, Sandy said firmly. If we're making a decision that threatens the Haven's core purpose, protecting the vulnerable, standing against tyranny, you should be able to stop it. The others murmured agreement. All right, Randy said slowly. I can do that. But I only use it if something truly threatens what we're building here. Otherwise, the council decides. And me? Russ asked. I was an alpha. I failed as an alpha. I'm not sure I should. You're our leader, Denise interrupted. Not because you're an alpha, but because you're the one who believed this was possible when the rest of us were too broken to hope. You coordinate, organize, make the hard calls when no one else can. That's not alpha authority, that's just leadership. Co-leadership, Randy corrected, taking Russ's hand. We do this together or not at all. The council voted, unanimously in favor. They spent the next 3 hours hammering out details, representation, decision-making processes, how to handle disputes. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As the meeting broke up, as people dispersed to their evening routines, Edmund pulled Randy and Russ aside. You know more people are coming, he said quietly. Word is spreading faster than we can control. By spring you could have 100 refugees here. Maybe more. We'll manage, Randy said. Will you? Do you have the resources? The space? The ability to feed and shelter that many people? We'll find a way, Russ said. We always do. Edmund smiled. I believe you will, but you're going to need help. My pack, the one I left, they're watching what's happening here. Some of them are interested, some are terrified, but all of them are paying attention. What are you saying? Randy asked. I'm saying the Haven is becoming a symbol. Proof that there's another way. And symbols are dangerous things, they inspire people, but they also attract enemies. Edmund's expression was serious. You're going to need allies. People who can stand with you when the real threats come. Because they will come, Randy. Packs that feel threatened by what you represent. Leaders who see the Haven as a challenge to their authority. You've won 2 battles. The war is just beginning. Then we'll fight it, Russ said. Together. As a community. Good. Edmund clasped Russ's shoulder. Because some of us are ready to fight it with you. After he left, Randy and Russ stood in the quiet evening, watching snow begin to fall again. He's right, Randy said. This is bigger than us now. What we started here, it's going to change things. Are you ready for that? Randy thought about the little girl who'd called her a hero. About Sandy's tears of relief. About 23 refugees who'd found safety when they'd given up hope. About 7 survivors who'd become family. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted, but I'm willing. And that's going to have to be enough. Russ pulled her close. And they stood together as snow painted the world white and clean and new. Somewhere in the forest, a wolf howled wild and free and unburdened by pack politics. And in the Haven, 45 souls slept safe and warm, protected by magic and choice and the simple belief that broken things deserved a chance to heal. The resolution wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. And Randy Sawyer, Haven keeper, mate, and builder of impossible sanctuaries, was finally ready to embrace it. Chapter 10. Home at last. 6 months later, early summer, the Haven had become a village. Randy stood on the hill, overlooking what they'd built, and felt something between pride and disbelief wash over her. Where once there'd been a single desperate cabin, now stood 23 structures arranged in careful harmony with the land. Living quarters, a communal hall, workshops, storage buildings, even a small infirmary, where healers, they had 3 now, tended to the sick and injured. The population had swelled to 97. 97 wolves who'd found their way here through winter storms and spring rains, drawn by rumors of a place where designation didn't define worth, where broken things were given space to heal, where an Omega wielded power that made even the strongest alphas think twice about causing trouble. The Haven had become everything the Dream Woman promised and more. You're doing that thing again, Russ said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. The mate bond hummed with contentment and amusement. That thing where you stare at what we've built like you can't quite believe it's real. Can you blame me? Randy leaned back against his chest. 6 months ago, we were 7 half-dead wolves in a cabin barely surviving winter. Now we're a community, Russ finished. A real, functioning community with a council and laws and people who actually want to be here. It still feels impossible sometimes. Welcome to Revolution, sweetheart. It always feels impossible right up until the moment it's not. He kissed the top of her head. Come on. The council meeting starts in 20 minutes. And you know Denise gets cranky when we're late. Denise gets cranky when we breathe wrong, Randy said. But she was smiling as she turned toward the communal hall. The building was the largest. They'd constructed a space designed for gatherings, meals, and the weekly council meetings that kept the Haven running. Inside, people were already gathering, familiar faces that had become family over the past months. Denise sat at the head of the table, reviewing notes with her usual fierce efficiency. She'd taken to the role of lead administrator like she was born for it, organizing supply chains and resolving disputes with equal precision. Wallace and Drew flanked her, Wallace handling security, Drew managing the hunting parties that kept everyone fed. Glenn had become their chief builder, his quiet competence translating perfectly to construction work. Craig ran training for anyone who wanted to learn combat skills, not for conquest, but for defense. And Wendell, the oldest of their original 7, had appointed himself keeper of stories, making sure everyone who came to the Haven had their experiences recorded, their voices heard. Edmund sat with his wolves. They'd officially integrated now, no longer visitors but full residents. And beside them, Sandy and her daughter Addie, representing the families who'd found sanctuary here. New faces too. Julianne, an Omega who'd arrived 3 months ago pregnant and alone, now serving as one of their healers. Brad, a Beta who'd fled an abusive pack and become their most skilled carpenter. Carmela, an Alpha who'd been exiled for refusing to participate in a territorial war, now training the younger wolves in negotiation and diplomacy. 97 stories. 97 Reasons Why the Haven Mattered. All right. Denise called the meeting to order. First order of business resources. Wallace, what's our supply situation? The meeting proceeded with the practiced efficiency of people who'd learned to work together. They discussed food stores, building materials, the 3 new families that had arrived last week and needed housing, normal problems, solvable problems, the kind of issues that came from growth and success, rather than desperation and failure. Randy listened more than she spoke. She'd learned over the months that her role wasn't to make every decision, solve every problem. Her magic protected the Haven's boundaries, healed the worst injuries, strengthened the wards that kept hostile wolves at bay. But the day-to-day work of building a community? That belonged to everyone. Last item, Denise said near the end. We've received a formal inquiry from the Silverbrook Pack. They want to establish diplomatic relations, trade agreements, potential alliances, recognition of our sovereignty. Silence fell around the table. They're not the first pack to reach out, Edmund said carefully, but they're the largest, and the most traditional. This could be a trap. Or it could be genuine, Carmela countered. Not every pack sees us as a threat. Some see us as an opportunity, proof that alternative structures can work. What do they want in exchange for recognition? Russ asked. Access, Denise said. They want to send observers. Learn how we organize ourselves, how we make decisions, how we maintain stability without traditional alpha hierarchy. They want to copy us, Wallace said. Or undermine us, Craig muttered. Randy looked at Russ through the mate bond. What do you think? I think we always knew this moment would come. The question is whether we're ready for it. Are we? Only one way to find out. We accept, Randy said aloud. With conditions. Observers are welcome, but they follow our rules while they're here. No challenging authority, no attempting to establish dominance, no treating anyone as lesser based on designation. They come as guests and learners. Or they don't come at all. And if they refuse, Glenn asked, then we know they weren't genuinely interested in learning, and we decline the relationship. Randy's voice was firm. We're not changing what we are to make traditional packs comfortable. That's the whole point of the Haven. The council voted. 8 in favor, 2 abstaining, none opposed. Motion passes, Denise said, making notes. I'll draft the response. Anything else? When no one spoke, she nodded. Meeting adjourned. Everyone tried to stay out of trouble for at least 24 hours. Laughter rippled through the room as people dispersed. Randy and Russ lingered, helping clean up, exchanging quiet words with those who wanted to chat. This was Randy's favorite part of council meetings, the after, when the formal business ended and people just talked. Shared stories. Connected. How's the shoulder? Randy asked Addie, who'd come over with her mother. All better. The girl beamed, demonstrating full range of motion. Healer Julianne says, I don't even need the bandage anymore. That's wonderful. Randy knelt down to the girl's level. And how are you liking living here? It's the best place ever. Addie's eyes were wide and earnest. Everyone's so nice. And nobody makes Mama cry anymore. And Drew taught me how to track rabbits. And Glenn is building me a treehouse. And she paused for breath. And you're here. The hero who saved us. I'm not a hero, sweetie. I'm just... You're a hero, Addie insisted. Heroes are people who help when nobody else will. That's you. Out of the mouths of children, Randy thought, came truths adults spent years trying to articulate. Then I'm honored to be your hero, she said gently. And you can be someone's hero too when you grow up. Deal? Deal. Addie threw her arms around Randy's neck. A gesture that had become familiar and precious, then scampered off with the boundless energy of childhood. Sandy smiled at Randy. She adores you. We all do. What you've built here, her voice caught. It's more than shelter. It's hope. Proof that the world doesn't have to stay broken. The world's still broken, Randy said quietly. We just carved out one small piece where things work differently. That's how change starts, though. One small piece at a time, until the small pieces add up to something transformative. Sandy squeezed Randy's hand. Thank you. For being brave enough to build this. After she left, Russ pulled Randy close. Come on, walk with me. They left the communal hall. Wandering through the village, as evening settled over the haven, people called out greetings as they passed, warm, familiar, the kind of casual acknowledgement that came from genuine community rather than forced hierarchy. Russ led her to the stone circle. The sacred space had been incorporated into the village now, not hidden, but honored. People came here to meditate, to connect with the magic, to feel the ancient power that thrummed through the land. But at sunset, it was usually empty, and Randy knew Russ had timed their walk deliberately. They stood in the center of the 7 stones, and Randy felt the haven magic pulse around them, stronger now, more complex, woven through with the energy of 97 souls who'd chosen to make this place home. "Do you remember," Russ said quietly, "6 months ago, when you stood here and claimed your power, when you were terrified you weren't enough?" "I remember," Randy said. "I remember thinking I was going to fail everyone, that I'd let them down, that being a haven keeper would break me. And now? She looked around at the village spread below them, at the lights beginning to flicker on in windows, at the smoke rising from cooking fires. "Now I know I was right to be scared. This is hard, terrifying, sometimes overwhelming, but it's also the most meaningful thing I've ever done." "You've changed," Russ observed. "Not just in power, but in confidence, in certainty." "So have you." Randy turned to face him fully. "You don't carry the 43 ghosts the same way anymore. They're still there, they'll always be there, but they're not crushing you." "I learned something," Russ said. "From you, from this place, from watching people heal. I learned that honoring the dead doesn't mean drowning in guilt. It means living well, building something they would have been proud of, making their sacrifice mean something. They would be proud," Randy said firmly. "Sarah, who told stories she'd love what we're teaching the children. William, who believed in honor, he'd see it in every choice we make to value people over power. All of them." Her voice thickened with emotion. "All of them would look at what you've built and know their deaths weren't meaningless." Russ pulled her into his arms, and they stood together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. "I love you," he said, "for being stubborn enough to believe broken things could heal, for refusing to accept that the world had to stay the way it was, for building something impossible and making it real." "I love you," Randy replied, "for carrying impossible weight with grace, for choosing compassion over cruelty even when cruelty would have been easier, for standing beside me and never trying to stand in front of me." The mate bond pulsed between them, complete now, fully formed, strong enough that Randy sometimes forgot where she ended and Russ began. They were separate people, but they were also something more, partners in the truest sense. 2 halves of a whole that worked because they'd each done the work of becoming whole on their own first. "What do you think happens next?" Randy asked. "After Silverbrook sends their observers. After word spreads even further. After more people come seeking sanctuary. We keep building," Russ said simply. "We keep proving it's possible. We keep standing for what we believe in, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And when Julian comes back. Because he would." They both knew it. The brother who'd tried to destroy everything Russ stood for wouldn't stay away forever. "Then we face him," Russ said. "Together. With 97 wolves at our backs and a haven that's proven it can weather any storm. We're not the desperate survivors we were 6 months ago, Randy. We're a community. A force. Something that can't be easily broken." Randy smiled against his chest. "Listen to you. Being all inspirational and hopeful. What happened to the traumatized alpha who thought he was a failure? He found a mate who refused to let him believe his own worst thoughts." Russ kissed the top of her head. "She's very stubborn. And wise. And powerful enough to make even the most broken wolves believe in second chances." "She sounds amazing," Randy teased. "She is. Terrifying and brilliant, and absolutely amazing." They stayed in the stone circle as night fell completely, as stars emerged in a sky clear and bright and infinite. Below them, the haven settled into evening routines. Meals shared, stories told, children put to bed, adults lingering over conversation and connection. This was what they'd built, not just shelter, but home. Not just survival, but life. Not just a refuge from the broken world, but proof that the world could be rebuilt into something better. "Thank you," Randy said quietly. "For what?" "For trusting me. For believing in this. For being brave enough to try something different when everything you knew had fallen apart. Thank you, Russ replied, for seeing me. For not letting me hide. They stood together, Haven Keeper and former Alpha. Omega and Wolf. Two people who'd been told they weren't enough, discovering that together, they were exactly right, and watched their impossible village breathe and live and grow. This was what it meant to be found, Randy thought. Not rescued, found. Like a key finding the lock it was meant to open. Like a river finding the ocean it was meant to join. Like broken pieces finding each other, and becoming something whole. The haven had claimed its keeper. The keeper had claimed her mate. And together, they'd built sanctuary from ruins. The story wasn't over, it would never truly be over. Because building a better world was work that continued every single day. But for tonight, in this moment, under stars that had watched over countless keepers before her, Randy Sawyer was exactly where she belonged. Home. Finally. Completely. Irrevocably home. Dear viewer, thank you for staying with Randy through the storm and the fire, through fear and transformation, through every moment she discovered she was so much more than the world told her she could be. Maybe you felt like her, told you're not enough, that your differences make you defective rather than special, that you don't fit anywhere, split between who you are and who others say you should be. But here's what her story teaches us. The things we're told to hide are often the things we're meant to claim. The qualities that make us different, that make us not quite fit the mold, those aren't weaknesses. They're the foundations of something new, something better. Something that changes the world one small haven at a time. Randy wasn't broken, she was becoming, and so are you. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What moment resonated most deeply? If you could have one power like Randy's, what would it be? Or simply, did you believe she deserved her happy ending? I read every comment. Your thoughts, your stories, your reactions, they matter to me. And if you want more stories like this, tales of outcasts who become legends, of monsters who turn out to be heroes, of love that sees past the surface to the soul, hit that subscribe button right now. Because here, we tell stories about the ones who don't fit, the ones who were told they're too much or not enough, the ones who learn that being different isn't a curse, it's a calling. Until the next story finds us, remember this: you don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love. You don't have to fit someone else's expectations to be valuable. You just have to be brave enough to claim who you really are. Broken pieces and all, because broken things can heal, and healed things can build something beautiful. With love and silver flames, Clarissa.